Since Dubai and the 24 hours then in January for this particular championship, there has been the odd bit of domestic racing taking place in the United States, but this is the first international race to take place after we slowly emerge out of the coronavirus pandemic, and obviously large parts of the world still very much affected by that and only just going into situations of lockdown. It's going to be a long run thing quite clearly, but amazing that Creventic have been able to organise this race and that it's gone so well so far. Obviously we've had a fair portion away from the race here on RS3, so need to update you first of all with the current standings, with 3 hours of the 24 still to go. Tim Muller for Herbert Motorsport and the Porsche 911 GT3R that they're campaigning currently lead. That's exactly as it was as we left the race last night at 11 p.m. local time. 640 laps though now completed, and the lead is just under an hour from the sister car, which has been majorly on the recovery, because that dropped back to something like 5th or 6th place after a gearbox change, or what we thought was a gearbox change, purely looking at the work taking place in the garage from a distance. But new gearbox in, and it took them a little while to diagnose that problem, I would say, and I know John Hindhaught's going to be joining us in a moment for a full summary of what happened overnight. I would say that car's not really missed a beat since it returned to the racetrack, because it's now in second position. Daniel Alleman back at the wheel, and the 91 car, as I say, trails by just under 59 minutes now, with 614 laps to its name. So that's easy to remember. 641 and 614 laps for both the Herbert Porsches. Mullner Motorsports Porsche Cup car is in third position, with Tom Cloet still at the wheel. He was, I think, as we signed off last night. I'm sure they've rotated through most of their other drivers since then. 921 though in third, and more importantly for them, leading its class. Then two TCR series cars. The first of them is the class leader, Miklas Borns, Autorama Motorsport by Wolf Power Volkswagen Golf. The 112 car leading Nicholas Bert, and the gap is currently a minute and 34 seconds between the Volkswagen and the Audi RS3 of Come To You Team Audi Sport. In 6th position, and back to the GT series, it's the Porsche 718 Cayman, again of Mullner Motorsport, and Axel Sartingen currently at the wheel there. Stefan Perrin drives the AC Motorsport Audi number 188, which is in 7th place overall, but third in the TCE division. And then two more Volkswagen Golfs, the first of them from French squad Code Racing Development, Thierry Boyer driving the 124. Christophe Lentz is in the pits for I was about to say scheduled pit stop, but no, it's been there for just under an hour now, the number 1 car, sadly. And that car then obviously receiving quite a bit of work. 5th place in the TCE series. Speed Lovers Porsche, driven by Eric Muez, is out on the track, and that's the 2nd placed car in the Cup division. The Red Camel Jordans.NL Cupra is the 6th placed TCE car, but I'm afraid that car's been in the pits now for just over 3 hours. So at 6 a.m. this morning, Luke Broikers brought that car in, and we haven't seen it since. 12th position for Jose Costa's Veloso Motorsport Porsche Cayman, 6th place in the GT series. And then the 3 cars that we still haven't seen, well, since we signed off last night after significant work was taking place. For the Aston Martin, the 401 car, both rear wheels completely locked. That looks suspiciously like a full retirement now for Rodrigue Guillon, who brought the Pro Sport Performance Aston Martin almost back to the pit lane. It had to be dragged the rest of the way, and we know all about the 2 Mercedes that hit troubles a long time ago now, 16 hours ago, for the Park Alga Racing GT4 Mercedes of Joachim Penteado and the rest of the team. And the HDP Winwood Racing Mercedes had a crash at turn 13 18 hours ago, and Bryce Ward sadly announcing that was a retirement probably about 30 minutes after we saw that problem. But otherwise, what have we got? 6 cars in the pits, therefore still 9 cars on track, and the potential for a few more to return as well, fingers crossed. Good morning though to John Hindhaugh, and indeed to Nick Damon, who join us again for the remaining 3 hours of this particular race. Still plenty to unfold, I get the feeling. And John, I know you've got a summary of what happened overnight.
Well, in as much, JP, as you were talking about the situation at the front of the field, Oh, hang on, let me just take those that onboard down a little bit. That's a bit loud in my lugs at this time in the morning. When that 91 Herbert car came out the pits after its gearbox change, it was an hour and 17 behind. I think I said at the time, and I'm doing that from memory, that it was 33 laps behind. As it stands at the moment, now that it rises and falls, of course, with the pit stops, but they're in the middle of a pit stop run at the moment. And a green flag run at the moment, rather. It's now down to 59 minutes or thereabouts behind the leader. So they have made very good progress through. They got back into second place just into the early hours of Sunday morning, and clearly have stayed there ever since and have pulled out in a 20-minute gap on the first of the 991 Cup cars. Overnight help, I would say, by an 11 hour and 10 minute green flag run, which came to an end around 6 o'clock local time, 6 o'clock in the UK as well, for a quick one lap of full course caution for debris out on the circuit, and then we had another one just after 8 o'clock this morning. I was just caught the back end of that, so I didn't see what caused it, unfortunately. So that means now we have had 7 code 60s for just on 50 minutes and 9 laps of full course yellow. There's been no change in terms of how many leaders we've had. 9 lead changes between 3 cars: HTP Winward's 84, Herbert 91 and Herbert 92. And Robert Renard improved the lap time, the best lap time, at 25 past midnight last night on lap number 346, down to a 1:44.692. So clearly that car, as I say, is in rude health with that new gearbox and the reset of the clutch that we saw them doing yesterday evening. Daniel Alleman, now aboard that car, has probably got that car, interestingly, not doing as many laps on its fuel as its sister car. We've seen the sister car doing 42 laps fairly consistently yesterday evening. That's dropped down a little bit now. Jürgen Höring did 32 in the last long run that they had, but in fairness, that probably then was slightly truncated for Tim Müller to get in because of the full course code 60 purple patch, and it looks like they came in twice to refuel during that. There's no reason for them not to. The interest is in the battle for the 4th position overall, which is also the lead of the TCE running, the TCE part of the race, which is Autorama, Nicholas Bourne and Nicholas Bert, with continuing problems for the 101 overnight. We saw it have some issues with pickup, and then they had to do a wheel bearing and a hub on that car. But those cars are only 100 seconds apart and on the same lap, battling it out, being half an hour ahead of the next car, which isn't even in their class, actually. So they've got about an hour and a half on that AC Motorsport car, which, remember, had its problems at the start of the race. They had paddle shift, they had fuel starvation, they had a fuel leak, which gave them fuel starvation. But that AC Motorsport car back up into a 3rd position in its part of the race. As into the pits comes the leader, and I'll say good morning to Nick Damon, who has some news of Aston Martin.
Good morning, John. Good morning, Johnny. Good morning, everyone. It's a lovely morning, both in Portimao and here in sunny Milton Keynes. So the carbon fibre triangle enjoying the same beautiful morning sunshine as is the Algarve, though I expect the chance of the Algarve staying dry over the next week is significantly more. Yeah, unfortunately, the Aston Martin, the Rodrigo Gillen piloted as it came in Pro Sport Racing Vantage, the other GT4 car. Remember, we lost its sister GT4 entrant, the Park Algar Racing Mercedes. I'm still not quite sure why. The car, which was brought in by Brazilian Joaquim Taido 16 hours ago, so they went quite early. Unfortunately, just towards the back end of our broadcast yesterday evening, we saw the car come in once, have a bit of a look around the netting of the driver, another look at the front wheel, and then suddenly it was stopped. They brought it on the back of a trailer, and the thing was crabbing badly, leaving two excellent black lines. I mean, the pride of any Dukes of Hazzard fan doing a burnout in his Charger. Another 11s it was leaving down the pit lane.
Can I just say Challenger?
Oh, thank you. I'm more than happy to take that correction. And they pulled it in. They were looking at the rear end. It looked pretty much, it's probably likely that they had a tow link here. Then when you look at the 11, you think, well, hang on a minute, that means the whole rear end was locked up, which points to gearbox or differential. Obviously more serious. The fact they've not come out again, obviously was serious to a point where they either didn't want to or couldn't fix it because they didn't have the parts, and unfortunately it was another retirement, and the GT4 field has been decimated. There are none left. I suppose officially, of course, they'll still win unless the Park Algar team can crawl out and do another 90 laps later this morning.
Yeah, that's a good point. And don't forget, this is a round of both the European and the Championship of the Continents. With the situation around the world at the moment, the revised calendar, Johnny Palmer, was released, which effectively sees the rest of the season staying in Europe as the third place overall car and the leader in the Cup class, that little black and blue H&R sponsored Müllner Motorsport machine is in for what appears to be a standard stop. He's done 31 laps, Tom, in that, and we talked about this yesterday, but worth mentioning again, I think, JP, just how well the Creventic team have reacted in getting this going, and with the different regulations, including the pit lane and pit box COVID regulations, but also how they've restructured the rest of the season.
Yeah, particularly because, some of the dates that were still left on the calendar that they wanted to visit had been countries that have been particularly badly affected by coronavirus, namely Italy and Spain. And I know that they wanted to go to Monza and they wanted to go to Barcelona when it was appropriate, when it was, the infrastructure of the country and the rules set from the various governments had been adjusted accordingly. So Monza's still very much on the bill. I know we were due to be there in March. The virtual 12 hours of Monza still was run as if it was March, even though that was only last month. And yeah, Monza is on the calendar for the 10th and the 11th of July, when by that point it should be not perfectly okay to go there, but once you abide by the regulations, travel to that country is a heck of a lot easier than it was at the end of March and throughout the whole of April. So fingers crossed that can still happen. Barcelona still occupies its traditional 24-hour days at the start of September, the 3rd, 4th and 5th of September. Then another trip to Italy, to Imola, which is a more regular jaunt for the 24H series. We've been to Imola a number of times now. That's scheduled for the 9th and 10th of October. And the one that took me a little bit by surprise yesterday when we were running through the calendar, Nick and I, at the start of the broadcast yesterday, Zandvoort now slotting into where Kota was until very recently, of course. But the trip to the US looking very difficult right now. So back to the homeland of Creventic for the first time in something like 3 years, and to the sandy beach at Zandvoort. So looking forward to that over the weekend of the 13th and 14th of November.
And that, Nick, directly as a result of Formula One not going there, in terms of being able to use up some of the noisier, loud days.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the only light side of the fact we had no racing for 3 months is a number of tracks have a lot more flexibility in what they can do now are there. Back up and running again because they haven't used up the goodwill of their neighbours, as it would be seen, by running hugely powerful, expensive and noisy race cars around for a while. So yeah, I mean, I think it's there is a lot.
just lost Nick briefly there, so I'll continue on because the race now 646 laps old, and the two Herbert Motorsport Porsches are neatly positioned. As I say, still about an hour between them, but as far as a recovery drive is concerned, the 91 crew will be thinking this is an awful lot better than we probably thought it was going to be even, what, 6 hours ago, when the car was out of the top 4 and stuck well and truly in midfield. But they are slowly working their way through, and I just wonder whether actually on an average lap time they can reel in the quintet that pilots the number 92 car. Michael Hughes, I'll remind you, took a little while to get involved in this particular race. They were holding him back from the rotation. Now, we never did get an explanation as to why that was, whether Michael actually wasn't at the track in the early stages or whether it was always the intention to leave him until later on. But they, bearing in mind that Jürgen Hering started the car at midday yesterday, Taki Constantinou took it over, the Greek. We had stints from Tim Muller and Marco Seefried. Then they went back to Jürgen Hering from memory, and Michael Hughes didn't get a go until I think at least the second time around for the other drivers he shares that car with. However, Michael proved to be very, very quick overnight, and it was almost like he was being held back for the darkness stints, because he went out during one of the nighttime shifts and set the fastest lap for that car in the darkness. So mightily impressive, and Michael now doing an awful lot more driving. But looking at the gap, when I first came in at 9 o'clock this morning, it was 59 minutes. It then dropped to 56 minutes, and it's now 52. So that gap's definitely coming down. Might just be as a result of various different pit stop schedules that the two cars are on, but that's going to be interesting to keep our eye on for the next 2 3/4 hours, whether they can get to, well, 45 minutes, just the first target surely, then half an hour, and then 15 minutes. The heat will really be down the back of the neck for the 92 crew. So looking like at the moment a win for Herbert Motorsport, but still possibly a bit of a question mark as to which car it's going to be. And the 991 class is still led by Moritz Krantz and the rest of his crew in the 921 car. Moritz, again, doing his fair share of driving there. It's the car that he shares with Tom Cloet, Jerome Blakemolen and Carlos Vieira. Also, gents, just trying to piece together exactly the reasons why some other cars look like they won't take much further part, and we have had it confirmed by the 24H Series Twitter feed that sadly the 101 Red Camel Racing Cupra is out of the race officially. Engine failure bringing the 101's charge to an end with only a few hours to go, and that was announced about 20 minutes ago. I know it's been in the pits for well over 3 hours. But finally the team have officially announced that they'll take no further part. So in TCE, Nicholas Bourne is back in the pits now into the fueling area in the 112 car. So the Volkswagen Golf trading positions with Nicolas Bertz and Tom Coronel and Nathaniel Berton's Audi RS3. That was originally entered as a 4-piece, but we haven't got the rally driver, Frenchman, who was due to be part of that squad, whose name escapes me now. It was Quinton Giordano, who was originally on the entry list. Actually, he's also been on the entry list, I noticed, for the 124 at a certain point as well. So maybe Quinton Giordano was looking for a drive in a couple of different cars. But the Come To You Racing Audi remaining just the 3 guys, and Nathaniel Berton, a late announcement into that team, as he is as well for a full season of World TCR racing. I say full season, half a season as it's turned out to be, but they're going to try and get as many different races in as possible in that particular World Championship. Again, I think that's going to be principally European based though, as Michael Hughes is about to cross the line again, and the gap back to the second of the Herbert cars is 52 minutes to Robert Renauer, but Renauer is posting quicker times than his teammate in the next door garage, Michael Hughes, although only by 0.3 of a second last time around. Nicholas Bert does resume the lead in the TCE series, so as Bourne pits, Bert jumps ahead. Didn't need to overtake that car on the track. Let's see what Nicholas Bourne, or indeed his new co-driver, can do in the 112 car, fully laden but with brand new Hankook tyres. The compounded tyre that's used across the whole of the entry, whether that be in GT or in the TCE series, is exactly the same. Obviously different sizes of tyres are required and to fit different sizes of wheels as well, but the compound does not change. It's Antti Burri, in fact, to take over from Nicholas Bourne in the Autorama Motorsport by Wolf Power Golf, so the flag of Finland reappears next to Burri's name. And it was Antti who was put into the car at the start of the race yesterday afternoon, and actually that first stint confused Nick and I a little bit because didn't seem to be anywhere near the pace of the two leaders, the Cupra and the Audi from 101 Red Camel and Audi's Come To You Team Sport entry. Those two went off like a scolded cat. Rick Brokers and Tom Coronel left Antti Burri a little bit in the shadows, sort of half a minute back, and then gradually, well, in the last 5 laps of the stint, Antti Burri just came out from nowhere and just caught up with those two cars and very nearly led the class into that first pit stop. He was certainly up to second place, and almost, if he'd given him another lap, probably would have taken the lead in the TCE category. Axel Sartingen is in the third placed TCE series car for AC Motorsport, who have struggled actually to be regularly in that top 3 throughout the race. Remember them flirting with 4th and 5th positions, but not a great deal better than that. Well, it is looking more promising now for Stefan Perrin and the rest of his crew at AC Motorsport. That's the car that Vincent Rademacher has driven a number of times in the past, and the 188 car this time at Portimao has Michael Blanchimont, Christophe Heymon and Hannes Morin at the wheel at various points, but it's Frenchman Stefan Perrin who drives the 188 car, actually qualifying 15th of 15 cars yesterday. Bear in mind, qualifying for this race took place on Friday for a couple of hours between 5 and 7 o'clock local time. It was a split session, so the GT Series cars qualifying separately from the TCEs. That really meant that with 6 cars in one session, 9 in the other, you could really pick and choose where you were going to go out. It wasn't that difficult to find a little bit of a gap in the traffic in order to post the time. And although a tow is reasonably important around this place, it's more important that you do well through the twisty stuff in the middle portion of the lap, and also towards the end as well through that complex section of turns 11, 12, 13. 14 is the very open hairpin at Sagres, and then through Valp corner, the final right-hander, which again goes on and on, but important to get that corner right because that obviously dictates how fast you can be down the main start-finish straight. Car number 1 in a little while ago now, an hour and 15 minutes. There was also some news on the 24H Series Twitter feed regarding the Autorama car. Gearbox, I seem to remember. Let me just find the relevant tweet regarding car number 1. Been in the pits for 45 minutes. It's now actually 75 minutes. And yeah, what appears to be a gearbox change. That car slipping back to 4th position. Maybe worse than that. No, now let's have a look. It's 5th position in the TCE series, with Lentz last to drive it. You're not going to fall any further down within the class than that, because, as I've already mentioned, the 101 has officially retired. Luke Brokers bringing that car in, but the engine failure finally doing for that 101 car, which is most unusual. Normally, these TCR cars are so reliable, despite them being designed to be sprint machines, as we were detailing yesterday. They can very easily do a 24-hour race, and sometimes back-to-back 24-hour races, but that 101 car expiring with 4 hours to go. And in the Cayman class, the 718 Cayman is currently leading its division with Axel Sartingen for Mühlner Motorsport. Code Racing Developments Volkswagen Golf, Thierry Boyer last to drive the black and green car then of France, and that car in 4th place in the TCEs. Still a really good mixture of the 2 series in one. Remember, it is a combined race effectively, and it reminded me a little bit actually of, we were chatting about the iRacing Virtual Le Mans, which will be taking place next weekend, with as many as 1,500 different entries in that race, but split into races of 50 cars in each, basically. And John described it as many different races all taking place in parallel universes with 50 cars. Well, that's sort of what we're trying to go for between the GT series and the TCE series race. Of course, they're not in parallel universes, and very easily a GT car could come into contact with a TCE, but the points are delivered as if they're separate races. There are 2 separate podiums as well, and this is something that properly came into being 2 years ago at Dubai, from memory, where we had 6 camels rather than the usual 3 for the podium, and we always try and give the GT series and the TCE series equal billing throughout the course of the 12 and 24-hour races that form the 24-hour series. So individual points again on offer. This is the start, this race, the first of the European season, and of course it's going to be a European season all the way to the finish now, without the 3rd continent sadly being visited in 2020. After Asia and after Europe, we were due to go to the United States and to Austin, Texas more specifically, but that's going to have to be postponed until 2021, or indeed this year's race cancelled, and let's hope that we can go to the Code to 24 hours next year. I'm sure the track would very much like to see us again, and I know that it goes down very, very well with the European drivers. A visit to COTA also attracts a good audience, both from a spectator point of view, but also from a driving point of view, team's point of view, from the US as well. The 2 Herbert Motorsport cars cross the line again. Gap about the same this time around, although that was a better lap for Robert Renauer, comparing it to his teammate Michael Hughes. And Robert Renauer probably about to be coming to the pits, because he was due across the line 20 seconds ago. Let's hope that that's nothing to be concerned about. No, he has gone through now, and in fact doesn't go into the pits. He completes that lap, which was lap 627. Moritz Krantz has completed 614 laps. They are the only 3 cars that are over the 600 lap marker, with Nicholas Baert into the pits. Now, we've already seen a stop for the earlier leader, Autorama Motorsport, so the Come To You team did owe us a stop, and Nicholas Baert is now in to do that. So the 117 car possibly about to change drivers. I thought that Baert wasn't long into that car. No, that's me getting confused. So we may well see Tom Coronel or Nathaniel Berton taking over from Nicholas Baert. Another young driver part of this particular race, 18, from Belgium, born in 2001, and has come straight out of karting pretty much. He did a season in 2019 of the FIA MSG Formula 4 Cup, and also how many races in the F4 Spain Championship? Well, pretty much, yeah, the whole season, in fact. So races at Navarra, Paul Ricard, Motorland Aragon, Valencia, Jerez. Actually raced at the Algarve International Circuit for rounds 16, 17 and 18 of last year's championship, and they finished their season in Catalonia. So obviously got ties with Spain and Portugal, despite being from Belgium. And so far this year, all that Nicholas has had a chance to do is some esports racing within the TCR world. So great for him to finally experience a TCR for real, and very quickly moving from single-seaters to tin tops. I guess what he's trying to do is dovetail a campaign in both the mini Formula 1 cars and the touring cars, and possibly even weave in some sports cars as well, as many different disciplines as possible early on in his career. And he's impressed a few people so far, no doubt, and a good little deal as well to get involved with Come To You Team Audi Sport. I wonder whether that will mean that he gets to visit Tom Coronel and Nathaniel Bertol at 1 or 2 World TCR race meetings this year as well. Anyway, that car's gone for fuel and it's about to rejoin. Needs to get out within the next couple of minutes because Antibury is slowly catching him in the Altarama car. So it's better head out of the final corner is the number 112, Antibury, and cross the line. And does so now. So Axel Sartingen is still at the wheel of the Mulder Motorsport machine. Stefan Perrin also into the pits in the Audi from AC Motorsport. Code Racing Development in what I think is their first Creventic race, and let's hope we get to see a lot more of them in due course. You know, it's not beyond the realms of possibility to get a podium for that particular crew, and Thierry Boyer has been doing plenty of driving shifts within that car. So let's wait and see where they can finish. But 5 drivers down on the original list. I don't think, again, Quinton Giordano is scheduled to be driving that car, or despite being on an early entry list. Bruno De Rossi, though, is, and we've also got Philippe Baffoun and Thierry Chocondali, who did quite a bit of the stints overnight as well, but they're 4th, and as I say, every chance of picking up a podium if someone were to have a drama a little bit ahead of them on the road. Nick Damon can join us again from sunny Milton Keynes.
Yesterday, when they were trotting around in the 147s, 148s, they now got a 145 last lap round for Robert Renau, and a 146 for Michael Hughes. So obviously they just put the fastest drivers, and they're just really pushing hard. But of course the problem is for Robert, I mean, even if he wants to he's got to make up a 51-minute gap to Michael, still on the back of that gearbox change. But I suppose really, as Robert runs Herbert with Alfie, but just chuffing he's going to get a 1-2.
Well, there is that as well, and yes, the gap that was starting to tumble, it's kind of just got lodged at 51 minutes, and that's probably far more reflective as, around about the top of the hour, the race leader came in for a stop, likewise the 91 as well, and we were just waiting for the lead margin just to establish itself again. It's looking like 26 laps as an advantage, yes, which equates to 51 minutes and change. And if you're only taking, half a second every lap, that's going to be a long time to try and eat into the best part of an hour.
It would need to be about an 11-week race, wouldn't it, to catch up? Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, the interesting thing on the very good live timing from the Dutch timing team is they have added this differential, which has stopped being, which has got past that thing where if you were more than a lap behind, it just went a lap. It now actually gives you the actual amount of physical time you're behind the car ahead of you. It doesn't matter how many laps are involved. So we're saying they're 51 minutes behind because effectively they've done 630 laps. When the leaders on 630 laps, that was 51 minutes ago, which is why it'll ebb and flow, because suddenly it'll go up again during a pit stop, or will suddenly crash down through a pit stop because the number 4 92 car would have actually had said 7 minutes for that particular lap because they were having a pit stop. So you might see it drop very suddenly to 44 minutes, and then the next pit stop for the 90 might go back up again. But it's a really useful feature I haven't seen before. I think it may have been in Dubai, but I didn't see the timing in Dubai because I was in the pits and getting wet. But it's very useful because it gives you a good view of where people actually are in the overall ebb and flow of the race, rather than just 1 lap behind, 2 laps behind, which doesn't mean anything as a number.
No, it's much better to have that reference, and the teams have more of an idea of the challenge put in front of them. As you say, the 91, they're kind of winning the race that they are now in, which was to try and beat everybody else apart from their teammate, and they're doing incredibly well actually to have worked their way through a fair bit of traffic and now to the relative safety of second overall. And Herbert will be very chuffed indeed to finally crack this race. Now that is in the absence of Scuderia Praha, but the Ferrari, the Bohemia Energy backed Ferrari, has been so dominant in the history of the 24 hours of Portimao. Relatively short history, I realise, but in 2017, 18 and 19 it was the prancing horse that took victory, and I think in each of those races they were up against Herbert, who just couldn't get the better of their Czech Republic rivals. But
so 3 years ago, though, I think, or 2 years ago, the Herbert team had that suspension punch through the top of the tower for an odd curb strike, and they were actually. My remembrance of that event was they were leading at that point, and they got. It was quite early on though. It was probably in the first 3 or 4 hours, and Mr. Bon, had a bit of a bad curb strike, and he was sitting there going, "Well," he had that kind of look on his face. Well, I didn't do anything different, and now the suspension is through the top of the shock tower. There's always those strange things that happen in an endurance race that you don't expect. That either suddenly give you great advantage or take you completely out. The 408 car, that is back up and running. I remember towards the end of yesterday, again, our coverage yesterday, the Veloso Motorsport Porsche came, and we did see that in the pits for a bit of time as well. But that's circulating. One of the local teams taking advantage of a very short run down to Portimao from their home base. But these Cayman themselves, they really have had a lonely race. They haven't even got the same spec of Cayman as the other Cayman in the race, which of course is piloted way up the field now by Muller Motorsport, and 6 overall Axel Serting, which is much newer cars. This has very much been a let's get some guys together, let's learn about 24-hour racing. We can do it at a track we know, and we can run as nicely as possible. But yeah, I mean, they were way off the pace initially. They have done that thing which you do when you've got 5 drivers rotating through an actual race. Is their lap time got closer and closer and closer and closer to what they should be. So we've seen laps of 157, 158 when they were struggling to do anything below, any of the drivers do anything below 205 during qualifying. So they've really dialed themselves in, and hopefully they'll have a team that will make the trip to one of the non-Portuguese based Creventic races in the future.
Yeah, of which there are many at the moment on the schedule, and exciting to see that we can, fingers crossed, get some split 12-hour and indeed a 24-hour race in before the end of the season. So Barcelona due to be the traditional 24-hour race, but that will have GT cars in it as well as touring cars, despite predominantly being run as most recently TCR event. And GT cars welcomed to that to Barcelona circuit either last year or the year before for the first time, and went brilliantly. So that's going to continue on.
Getting to the Barcelona race is always incredibly hot. There's always an element of of some sort of swimming pool in the back of the pits as people are just flopping there as they've been done an hour and a half in 40-degree outdoor temperatures. So it's really weird because you think in September they're beginning to cool down, but it does seem to be to toast all the drivers specifically. And of course it does present challenge for the drivers, for the cars as well, once you're running that sort of heat for a large length of time.
Yeah. And also sometimes that heat can break into significant storms as well. I remember a very violent storm at Barcelona with the lightning conductor being in maximum use, which is part of the pit lane infrastructure there. And yeah, that posed a slight problem on the Saturday night. Everything cleared up nicely though for Sunday's running, and that will be a straight through, of course, 24-hour race. We have had split 24s at Kota in the past for a pause overnight, but Barcelona's loud days and its curfew rules allow for a straight-through race, which is great to have. Likewise, here in Portugal as well, because although our broadcast has stopped at various times over the last nearly 21 hours, they've been racing all the way through the night, and at the back section of the circuit got very, very dark indeed, and tricky when you've got not too many cars in the race. One or two have dropped away, of course, since we got going as well. You don't have that reference point of a car in front of you, for example, that a lot of other drivers do seem to like. However, because of the nature of this track, that bits of it fold back on itself, you've also not got the distraction of headlights coming back at you and potential being blinded. That is less likely with fewer cars out on track.
Yeah, the other thing to remember, of course, is because of the uphill and down-dale nature of the track, some of the times you're not getting to see very far ahead of you, because if you're going uphill, of course, your lights are shooting much in a distance, of course, the angle. So you end up having, you might have these fantastic headlights, which you see on a straight line, you can see for hundreds of metres, but when you've got a bit of uphill, suddenly that cuts away a lot of the vision. Then, uphill, Johnny, blind corner, you've really got to have some confidence in what you're doing. Because otherwise you are literally guessing in the dark at that point. For most of the day, you've been guessing in the light, then you're guessing in the dark, and it's a whole extra skill. And the chance of, actually, this is the split between the and we see this in a lot of gentleman drivers. A lot of gentleman drivers cannot or don't want to race at night, not because of the danger, but because the pace disappears. They haven't got that confidence in the car, they haven't got the experience. And so we have seen, a couple of the teams, most noticeably the 92 car, rotated some of its drivers very much through the day and then saved other drivers for the night, because they don't suffer the same, but may enjoy driving at night. They might be quicker at night, they might like the quiet, the lack of distractions from the side of the track. But it's that kind of individual thing. Am I 2 seconds a lap slower in the dark, or am I 2 seconds a lap faster at that level? Obviously professional drivers are equally quick, but when you've got a mixed bag of talent within your talent pool in your driver lineup, it's another thing you need to think about in these overnight 24-hour races.
Yeah, and where you utilise that talent as well, where they are most effective on a race that's sort of constantly changing, has many different phases to it. 2 hours and 17 minutes still to go as the 92 car works its way through turn 4 at Lagos and now turn 5 and heads down the back straight again over the rise and into the blind Tourer VIP, blind until basically it's time for you to hit the brakes. It's a very rewarding part of the circuit, that, particularly the hairpin, if you get a good run through, because that dictates how quickly you can then ascend the hill through the kink and get the car set up for the double right-handers at turn 8 and 9. And then the return leg through the swooping left-hander that takes you up to Portimao corner. That's also a corner of two different parts, and on some track maps actually labelled as two different corners, turns 10 and 11. Michael Hughes then back over the line. 6.62 laps now completed, and the gaps come down a little bit again. 50 minutes and 59 seconds back to Robert Renard.
What that tells you is that in lap 635, Robert Renard was faster than whoever was driving that lap for Michael Hughes.
Yes.
it's kind of bit like Doctor Who, isn't it? We're kind of actually watching two different timelines going at the same time. It's a timeline as they're trying to catch up on with the following car, but the leading car is still stretching away. But of course, we can get an accurate idea of what's going on a few laps ago. Oh, well, no, an hour ago he was doing that. So you will see a sudden jump. If you get a chance to look at the live timing, which is linked obviously at the Creventic website, you will see a sudden jump both up and down when one of the teams came in for a pit stop on a different lap than the others. And it may be that the lead will drop down to 43 minutes and go back up to 50 again because they're on different pit stop strategies.
Yeah, even though the pit stop's not actually taking place right now, it was,
exactly,
as you say, an hour ago. Yeah, gotcha. Nathaniel Berton, not sure I mentioned him taking over the Come To You Team Audi Sport RS3, but he did from Nicolas Bert, and that car is in second position in the TCE series. A much closer margin of 1 minute and 42 seconds between that car and Antibury's Autorama Motorsport by Wolf Power Volkswagen Golf. Same platform, the Volkswagen and the Audi, and indeed the Cupra, which is now retired, sadly, number 101. But it's the same engine and drivetrain as well for those VAG products. And the only thing that's very different is the silhouette of the Audi in booted form, the RS3, as opposed to the hatchback of the Volkswagen Golf. And then we've got the Porsche 718 Cayman of Mullner Motorsport with the 421 leading the Cayman class. And this is the first race, to my mind, that the Cayman division has become its own entity. And obviously there was a decision to be made as to whether you could still be competitive within the GT4 category with the Cayman. And much like in the newly renamed NLS Championship in Germany, formerly VLN, there is an exclusively Cayman Cup class within that, Cup 3.
The interesting thing is, Johnny, is that actually the fastest lap for the Cayman is faster than the fastest laps for the two GT4 cars.
Oh, so is it reverse actually then? The Caymans are too quick for the GT4?
Well, I don't know. I think they just decided to split it out. Maybe so it's a 155 point, well, give or take, 155.3 for the Cayman. The best lap for the Park Algar Mercedes is 155.42, and the best lap for the Aston Martin was 156.2. So I know it's driver dependent and everything else, but in most events, and I think possibly this split has been, I slightly cut you off, as you pointed out, was now something that happens in VLN, and maybe one of the ways to kind of encourage the VLN entrants to look at Creventic, say no, we'll run it a separate class, but certainly on pure performance terms, with the correct drivers on board, those Cayman GT4s are absolutely on the pace of the Astons and the Mercedes.
Well, what it might have been is that they can run full fat now, whereas before they had to be balanced to a unrealistic level to to get it right within GT4. And maybe some of the Cayman teams have said, well, we'd really like to run all guns blazing with these cars. Can you create a new class for us? We'll get the word from Gary and others next time we have the opportunity to about this new division. And let's hope that there are a few more takers for the Cayman class as we head to Monza in about a month's time, 10th and 11th of July.
I would be very interested to know whether the Creventic phone is ringing off the hook on Monday morning with people interested in actually getting a bit of real track time in the early July in Monza. I mean, it's a very attractive circuit. One of the reasons, of course, that the circuits are chosen by Creventic, if you think about it, choosing Grade 1 circuits, these aren't the cheap circuits to rent. These are, they are expensive places to go with full infrastructure. But it's all designed to attract the teams, the gentlemen drivers. Because do you want to race? I don't know. I was thinking of a track that's not. Name a track that's not very popular. I don't want to slag any tracks.
Oh, you've dropped me in it there, haven't you?
No. So do you want to drive around at the Nick and Johnny ring in the middle of Eastern Europe?
That's not popular at all.
Yeah, or do you want to go to Monza or Imola or Barcelona? And that's what they found historically is when they put the tracks on, they raced on the tracks that was cracking tracks, but just not with the heritage, not with the history. They got less entries than if you put them on a track that everyone knows. I really want to race at Monza. I really want to race at Imola. I really want to race, wherever. And that's why they've very much concentrated now on getting the races at circuits that tend to have F1, certainly major events. Or have historically had major events. It's kind of like a big attraction. We're not asking you to trundle around an industrial estate track in Spain. We're saying you're going to one of the premier motor racing circuits in the world with history that goes back 60 years. Would you like to race there? Yes, I blinking well would. And that's the point. It's a very different feeling. Just as a journalist, when you go to one of the historic tracks, walking out into the pit lane at Monza is different from walking out the pit lane at Snetterton. It's just a fact. They're both tracks. They both produce great racing, but it's a much more. You think, wow, that's amazing. And it's the same. Even in the States, you go to COTA, and COTA's like a wow factor. It's the F1, it's everything else, and other tracks are just purely for their attractiveness, not for their ability to bring quality racing, and not saying anything about the ability of the track to organise a race. People basically want to go home and say, look, I was racing the weekend. Really? Yeah. And where were you racing? The Nick and Johnny ring. Okay. Where are you racing? Monza. What, Monza? Wow.
Actual Monza.
Yeah, well, they let you at Monza. What? Yeah. The next question will be, what? Are you in F1? And you can lie at that point if you like, but but it has that kind of wow factor, and it's bucket list stuff. You tick off, and I've raced there, and, I would also think the Monza race, but I'm looking forward to the Monza race. We've not seen an absolute flat-out sprint race. Flat-out full speed race on one of those super fast tracks in Creventic before, so that should be very interesting.
Yeah, it should, and it will be run to the split format, so 12-hour race, but a chunk on the Friday night, and then the bulk of Saturday as well. And yeah, I know they were delighted, Creventic, to announce Monza in the calendar at the end of 2019, and a real shame that it couldn't happen on the schedule weekend, but delighted that we can announce that it's still in the calendar for next month. And yeah, I mean, the other thing I like about the 24H series is that they obviously do want to get to the Grade 1 circuits, but then if they're not available, then other places are considered, and one or two circuits that I, for example, never even heard of that were on calendars in sort of 4 or 5 seasons ago, and they still made those work as well. But the Grade 1s, really, you can understand why they go down so well with the drivers and teams. Hannes Morin in the AC Motorsport Audi is back up to 3rd position. That's because of more rotating within the pit stops for Code Racing. I think I mentioned that Thierry Boyer had brought that car in for a stop. Still not seen again the Volkswagen Golf though. Gearbox change, not the work of a moment for that crew, but we're almost up to 2 hours now, and Herbert were able to do their gearbox change in an hour.
I think that's the joys, probably of having a rear-engine car where the gearbox is easily detachable from the engine without having to remove the engine. Whereas, obviously, if you've got a gearbox in a front-wheel drive car, it's slapped on the side, so the engine's got to come out to get the gearbox out. It's just a bigger job. Do we know they are actually changing, or are they just packing up?
We haven't had that confirmed, but I got the impression, I've only read one tweet about that team, but I got the impression that they hadn't quite given up just yet. In the pits, and had been at that point for 45 minutes, so what appears to be a gearbox change, yeah, that indicates to me that they're carrying on. But of course, when you actually get halfway into the job, you realise quite how long it might take, and then you might have to reassess. So we'll probably get another update on that in the next hour or so, and see whether that's an official retirement as well. But it'd be a shame to lose another car. Always a shame to lose a car, obviously. The 112 then leads the class from the Come To You Racing Audi, and it's 2 RS3s in the top 3, in fact, with the AC Motorsport example as well.
Lead Cayman in the pits, the 421, Axel Cycling getting out. You can see very clearly the 2 men in the flory jackets are the 2 guys allowed over the wall to actually work on the car. The guy in the blue on the left, he is officially the lollipop man, but he is then allowed to clean the windscreen and clean the glass as well. So it's 3 people in turn, all wearing masks, of course, for COVID reasons. The GT4s and, of course, the Caymans and the TCs all have 5 nut studs on the wheels, so it's a much bigger proposition only having 2 people to change the tyres, because it just takes so much longer. Now, what we have seen, Johnny, of course, is the TCR cars, being front-wheel drive, will normally just change the fronts on perhaps through 3 sets of fronts before a set of rears gets changed. But it looks like with the Cayman being a mid-engine car, more balanced, so you've got power being done by the rear, steering and braking being done by the front, rather than everything being done by the front. They're doing a 4-tyre change at every stop.
Also a chance to give the car a nice little clean, so that the front bumper...
ballet.
Yeah, the front bumper is pristine again. That car looking actually very, very straight indeed. So no surprise that it's doing pretty well in the standings.
Yeah, I think they've had a clear run as far as I know. They've not had anything that's gone particularly anywhere awry. They certainly have a car, as you say, which is pristine. It's not got involved in any scuffles. And also, of course, and the key point about that, they haven't been under tremendous pressure, because they've been effectively the only Cayman / GT4 running for the past in contention for the past 13 hours, because they were never going to have an issue with the other Cayman, because it was a different model and they were 6 seconds lap fast just based on the sheer generational improvements to the cars. So this is a race where you really are only racing yourselves, because you're racing your ability to keep the car pristine, keep the car well used, make sure you hit your marks, make sure you don't wear the car out, and just say this is how we're going to do a 24-hour where we're actually under no pressure, but let's still keep the pace up so we can learn stuff, and the drivers can learn, and everyone can enjoy their podium, or at least their trophy. I'm not sure there's going to be a podium, certainly.
No, for understandable reasons, and that decision being taken in Formula One as well, at least a very different podium ceremony, if there was one at all. I was noticing in the press yesterday. And still the calendar in F1 taking shape, Nick, but an interesting story knocking around the paddock this weekend in Portimao that maybe we'll get a visit, or two in fact, to the Algarve International Circuit.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a kind of a concept now that back-to-backs are a great idea if you can fit them in. Because we already have two programs, of course, in Austria for the opening 2 rounds on the 4th and the 11th of July, and then 2, or 5th and 12th, anyway, and then 2 at Silverstone. Currently there are 8 races announced, which finish at the moment with Spa and then Monza. There's a growing feeling that the calendar will then go to Sochi in Russia for 2 races, because Sochi is basically as a Olympic venue is designed to be hermetically sealed. That was more for security reasons, but obviously you can now do it for COVID reasons. And then the next thing is they're kind of skewing the idea of where they should be going, which is the Far East, America, for logistical reasons, and they're looking to come back to Europe in late September, early October. So that instantly says you need to go somewhere south to keep the weather and the dryness. And there's a very strong rumour that Portimao is going to pick up a double header, possibly the last week of September and the first week of October, or more likely the first 2 weekends of October. So you'll then have a double header here, and then at that point I think they're talking about perhaps doing 1 race in Italy, maybe Mugello, maybe Imola, and then that'll be it for a few weeks, and they'll go off to the Far East, the Middle East for the final 3 races and get 15. But yeah, it's been spreading this concept that Portimao will get themselves a double header. And oddly, this little trial run race, just a Creventic race, which is in many ways is at the other end of the motorsport spectrum to F1, is a fantastic trial. It's showing, look, we're up and running. We're up and running 2.5 months before you need us. Everything's going well. We've got the distancing worked out. The track's up and ready to go, and it's kind of like almost a come and get us sort of plea, isn't it? Look, hello, this is what we can do now, and don't forget, when you get to F1, and by that point I don't believe they'll be running the support series, because they'll have had enough races done in F2 and F3. They need to get 10 done, and they're going to get 8 done almost immediately, and then final 2 out in the Middle East. So you're only looking at accommodating, theoretically 20 cars. So it's the pit lane's big enough to possibly even distance by pit boxes, and it's a great track and it's a great circuit, and the reason it hasn't had an F1 race, despite being built for F1 testing and potentially F1 races, has always been down to money. It's always been down to cash. They couldn't pay the fee, and realistically they weren't sure they'd get a crowd. I mean, that's fair enough, but there isn't a fee involved now. It's about the ability to host a race in a safe manner and put on a good event, and in those elements, no issue whatsoever. And of course, they still have some races programmed here. Still, they've got a historic race, I think, the last weekend of October, and you may actually be going here. You're certainly going here in voice only. You may even be going really with the ELMS at the back end of. Is it beginning of November?
Yes, I'm still trying to kind of commit to memory all of the new dates, but everything's shuffled back. Obviously, it was originally built to be a 6-race campaign, the European Le Mans Series, now just 5. And yeah, 1st of November is at the moment the date to the Algarve International Circuit for the final race of the season for the 4 hours of Portimao, after a visit to Paul Ricard next month, 19th of July, and in between those 2 races, Spa, Barcelona and Monza. So the only one we'll actually miss will be Silverstone, which was obviously given an ELMS date at the start of the year, and we were due to race on the Sunday of that Silverstone weekend, with the WEC race due to take place on the Saturday. That's not going to happen now, but it will be incredible if we still get 5 races in for the ELMS when it looked a lot worse than that. just a couple of months ago or so. We've done another hour, and that was hour 22. So just 2 hours remaining, and a chance in a second then to look through the current standings. The top two haven't changed since we last checked up, but nevertheless, the gap between them has stabilised to 51 and a bit minutes now, and that's kind of what we're expecting probably to the finish. The 91's obviously had a big drama with the gearbox change necessary, and at least one pit stop before they'd actually worked out that's what needed addressing. So it did take them rather out of the mixture of the top three and drop them back to midfield, and they've taken the rest of the race to work their way back up to the second place, the 91 car. But 92 not missed a beat so far, and they're looking now to finish the final 2 hours in the same vein. Jürgen Hering, Taki Konstantinou, Marco Seefried, Michael Hughes and Tim Muller are the quintet then that are doing so well to lead the 24 Hours of Portimao 2020 edition. 91 car in for a fuel stop. Robert Renau possibly to get out then and hand over to one of his co-drivers. Moritz Krantz is in third position in the GT series, but more crucially for that team, they lead their class, the 991 division for Müllner Motorsport, the Porsche Cup car. And then it's the TCEs that have firmly wedged their way into the top five on the combined results, or the combined standings as they are right now. So Antti Burri to the lead of the class in the TCE series in the Volkswagen Golf run by Autorama Motorsport by Wolf Power, car 112. Nathanael Beton in the 117 car does tend to lead during the pit stop cycle, so still close enough to mount a challenge, just 90 odd seconds back from the Golf. And then in third position in the TCEs, it is the AC Motorsport Audi RS3 of currently Hannes Morin. I've missed out Daniel Schwerveld, who is fourth in the GT series but leads the Cayman division in the 718 Cayman GT4 Club Sport. That car number 421 then is in sixth place when you combine both races. And then the Code Racing Development Volkswagen Golf, fourth in the TCE series, being driven by Quinton Giordano. So Giordano is very much part of that five-driver lineup in the 124, despite originally being announced as being with another team. The ninth position is Olivier Dons for Speed Lover. That's their Porsche that is second in the Cup class and ninth overall. Christoph Lenz brought his car in an hour and 50 odd minutes ago now to assess a problem, which turned out to be the need to change the gearbox in the sister Autorama Motorsport Volkswagen Golf. That car has yet to re-emerge. We know for sure that the 101 is a retirement, the bright orange Cupra from Red Camel Jordans.nl. Jose Costa's Veloso Motorsport Porsche Cayman is in the fueling area, so that'll pop back out onto track in a moment or two. And the three further retirements are Pro Sports Racing's Aston Martin, the Park Alga Racing Team Mercedes AMG GT4, and the HTP Windward Motorsport Mercedes, which is out with accident damage. So still the sun continues to shine, a little bit of wispy cloud overhead of this Algarve International Circuit, and the rubber's taken a fair bit of time to go down, but I would imagine now the track is in optimum condition as from a grip perspective. It's obviously warming up though, and the ambient temperature starting to get very warm indeed at 10 o'clock in the morning. So that will not help the tyres. But there would have been a period overnight where I'm sure we had effectively a happy hour, where the temperatures were at a point where the engines love it. They love the cooler temperatures, of course, and the tyres were liking this bed of Hankook rubber now that has gone down and formed a racing line effectively. So the fastest lap of the race, I'll need to check to see when we had further improvement on that, but the statistics page is always very useful within the Creventic timing there. Best lap history, 25 past 12 this morning, which was lap 346. Robert Renauer put in a 144.692, so it was a relatively early happy hour, in fact, 10 hours ago, and an average speed bang on the nose of 160 kilometres per hour for that sixth fastest lap of the race. but it's only ever been held by 2 different cars, and indeed 2 different drivers. Indy Doncher, who started the race very well indeed in the HTP Winwood Motorsport Mercedes, set the fastest lap on lap 3. Renault then improved on lap 4 in his Porsche, had an even better one on lap 5, and then that fastest lap stayed the fastest for another 340 odd laps. 12:30 we had the improvement, and no one's gone better than the 144.6 since then.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting you mentioning about the happy hour and the tyres and the grip. The other thing to remember is, even though there's only 15 cars, there still has been a tremendous amount of pickup created, a lot of marbles on the side of the track. We, in fact, got a wide shot a second ago going down the main straight, and there's a lovely little off-running of tyre bits and debris and detritus on the right hand side as we look at the left hand side of the drivers. But there's even more going around turn 1. Of course, this is because of the abrasive nature of this track. I mean, the track is, you're seeing a lot of tyres. No one's double sitting anything, or perhaps rear tyres in a TCR. And that pickup, of course, with combined with the fact that you need to go offline to lap, and if you've got such pictures now, you can see all the rubber there on the outside of the track. And when they come around the first corner, which the 4.8 will in the second, there's a great line of what can only be described as rubber crud, and there we are. Just with 15 cars, in fact, really only 14 and running for any length of time, which is, the problem with that is if you have to go offline to overtake someone or to be overtaken because you made a minor mistake, you will pick that up. Now you get pick up, and I'm not sure that's what's caused the 978 to be facing the wrong direction. The speed lover car, that looks more like a simple mistake, but you pick up the pickup and you end up either with an unbalanced tyre for a while, but more importantly, it gets thrown off. And we saw yesterday, one of the problems for the now retired Red Camels Jordan team was they had great globs. They had baseball-sized pieces of round up rubber bits and bobs stuck in the back of the wheel arch, and it can get in the way. And we've seen historically, of course, that can catch fire and cause all sorts of problems. So yes, the racing line is probably absolutely fabulous right now, but of course the racing line ends up getting narrower and narrower and narrower as you have more cars putting down more rubber, because the spread of the marbles gets closer and closer to the ideal racing line, and you end up if there were 60 cars here, we would probably by now have a single line racetrack, because it would just be nothing but marbles around the outside of that line.
Yes, and the marbles tend to accumulate as well on the faster parts of the circuit, the long straight here. So you're obviously getting the abrasive nature on the tyres through the corners where they're working hardest, but then those flecks of rubber are finally thrown off at the higher speeds on the front and back straights here, namely. But
I think you've known. You haven't been lucky enough to go on a racetrack which has got rubber track. We've done a few laps with ordinary road cars around with Creventic circuits after they've had some running.
Yes.
And if you do run over and pick up a bit of a marble on the tyre, it's virtually impossible to get off. And it does feel like you've got a puncture. The first time I did, I went round at I think it was Barcelona. We were in kind of we called the taxi laps. You're in a hire car, so you're a bit worried to begin with. I went over and got pick up. And I actually had to stop and look at the car, because I thought that tyre must be completely ruined. But it was just a lump of rubber got stuck halfway in the tread, halfway up, was completely unbalanced in the wheel. If you think about when you get you buy new tyres and get them balanced at the tyre shop, and they put a tiny little bit with steel now, it used to be lead, just precisely at a point on the bottom end of your rim or something, perhaps 5 grams. Well, you pick up a 40 gram or 50 gram lump of rubber which is stuck randomly where you happen to go over it. It feels like the wheel wants to fall off.
Yeah.
And it takes a while to get. I think one of the tracks which I think when Joe went round on with me, we about 3 days later we were driving back to the airport, and there was still all the detritus rubber stuck in the treads. It doesn't go anywhere because it's rubber. So once it rebonds to wherever it's got, it then has to wear out.
Yeah, and presumably somebody was back at the hire shop then as we handed the car back that was ready to scrape all that off, or the next customer had the bad luck of having one of our old cars, which I wouldn't wish on anybody really. The way we treat them.
Yeah, well, perfectly, always easy listening.
Of course.
But the other thing, of course, that's obviously more extreme because that was a treaded tyre. When you've got a slick, it will throw off the pickup quicker. But still, you can suffer from pickup a lap and a half after you got it originally, before it finally gets taken back off the surface again. It hasn't got anything with the slick tyre, hasn't got anything to grip onto like it does with the treaded road tyre.
AC Motorsport Audi heading through turns 1 and 3 at the start of the lap, and is actually very, very close now to the 124 Golf from Code Racing Development. So Quinton Giordano under a little bit of pressure there, not for position, but for Hannes Morin to put another lap actually on that car. So Morin and Giordano are together on the timing screen, 4th and 5th, but in reality it's about 25 laps between them as they head now out of Thora Vip and onto the kink at turn 7. Turn 8 and 9, pretty tricky as well. You've got to scrub some speed off to get through 8, and then it's a much firmer stop into turn 9 at Samsung, and very important as well to get good drive out of that more tight right-hander, because it's a really steep climb out of there. It reminds me a little bit of the second corner at the Red Bull Ring, where you're turning but also having to continue to climb up as well to go across the top shelf bit effectively of Red Bull Ring, the back straight. So that is tricky in a front-wheel drive car, which is scrabbling for grip at the best of times, even before you add in the incline. The 92 car is the race leader, and Michael Hughes has brought that Herbert Motorsport Porsche into the pits. Also stopping on this lap is the 978 Olivier Dons driven Speed Lover Porsche from the Cup division. That car's
was a car we
ninth.
saw having a spin a couple of laps ago. So
Yes.
I'm not sure whether that's cause and effect or just coincidence, but he had a spin. He'd been in pits for 3 minutes and hasn't moved. So yes, he wouldn't normally be stationary for 3 minutes. So there is obviously some looking into why that car was suddenly facing the wrong way. So the Speed Lover Porsche suffering more issues, and a slight problem for the 92 as well, as they have had to restart right again. A little problem with the radio connection or the drinks connection at the top of the top behind the shoulder of the driver there he was driving on left-hand drive, so the right as we look at it, and the Speed Lover Porsche gets going as well. So indicatively the time stopped there fiddling about with tyres and driver change was 1 minute 35 for Michael Hughes, but of course for the Speed Lover Porsche, who had a bit of a shufty as well, it was 3.5 minutes. They had an extra 2 minutes of having a look at what's going on because he was facing the wrong way. So whether they found anything, or it was just a kind of a confidence thing for the driver. Yeah, it wasn't you. No, there's a problem. We fixed it, and they move on. But yeah, because the virtual lead had gone out to 52 minutes, which is how far Ralph Bond was behind Michael Hughes. But he's going to come right down again now. Actually, no, it isn't going to come right there. It won't come right down again until, of course, they get to that lap where this pit stop happened. If that makes sense.
Yes, for the car. Yeah, okay. It sort of makes sense. As you say,
it's a pity you can't get Stephen Hawking in for this bit, isn't it, really?
But as you say, the gap is dictated by where the leading car was at the equivalent point. So that's the best part of an hour ago. And it might have been on the track, it might have been in the pits. And it pays no relation to where the car is right now. It's more of a reference point, but nevertheless good to have. And as Nick says, far better than it just saying 30-odd laps down, so plus 30 laps. You do actually get a time differential. And the same goes for the second to third place margin as well, which is 26 minutes between Ralph Bone and Moritz Krantz. Now, Krantz driving a 991 Cup car, so they're not looking to win the race outright. And actually, Mulner Motorsport doing a splendid job in bossing their particular class and fighting the 978 car, which has just had its own drama with a spin out on track and now a probably 5-minute pit stop. Yeah, it is up to 5 minutes now. Although back in the fueling area, Olivier Dons, probably actually going to be a driver change there at Speed Lover, which will be confirmed as that car comes back out onto track. From a penalty perspective, there are one or two that need to be served at the next stop for the 991 class leader. In fact, 16 seconds to be soaked up in the penalty box next time they come in, and a couple of 10 seconds for the number 112 class leading TCE series car, the Autorama Golf, and also a 10 seconds has been assessed for the Speed Lover Porsche as well. So that might have been served in the stop that they've just done actually, and the 10 seconds will be deleted from the final column on timing and scoring as soon as that car returns. No, because it's back out on track now and still the 10 seconds remain. So maybe they didn't come in, serve that. You don't have to do it straight away. In other championships, there is a rule that you've got to come in and serve the penalty separate from your normal pit stop and within something like 3 laps. It's fine to let them build up and accumulate, but I think we worked out it was 2 hours that you have to take the time penalty, and you can take it as part of a regular pit stop as well.
Yeah, you come in, the pit penalty is your pit entrance, so you come in, you stop there, you take your penalty, and you carry on, and then, you know, do the tyres, fuel, whatever you want to do after that. You can take them on a code 60 if you have to, but they're doubled. But yeah, I mean, in the last 2 hours, controversially, you don't have to take them; they get added to the end, which I think. I remember having a very vehement conversation with Gary about this. With Jerry about this, I think after Mugello about 4 years ago, the year when the RS01 Renault won.
Yes.
I
think that was 2016, so it's good memory.
Yeah. I had a conversation with Gary about this. Say, look, that doesn't work, because if you don't take it, you can end up with an extra lap, just a very slow extra lap, but the extra lap can put you in front of people. But it's, you know, I suppose there is a practicality. There's a kind of a purist in me. That's how it should be. Then there's a practicality about how do you manage, you know, these penalties which happen towards the end, and you have to manage your way, and you don't want people pulling in the pits, and you don't want to have a draconian, you know, sort of fines. Perhaps it should be that, you know, you get a bit of a less of a let off at the end, perhaps in the last hour or something. But you know, you have to manage it in some way. And everyone knows what it is, and the rules are the same for everybody.
You could say that if you choose not to take it within the race and take it at the end of the race, the penalty is doubled.
Well, just to explain the problem with this at the end of the race. If say you've got a 30-second penalty. I've got a 30-second penalty. That means that I am 30 seconds further back on the track. So if you had a minute and a half time for a lap, you'd be 1/3 less likely to complete a lap, wouldn't you? Because you were a third of a lap back. Yeah. Okay. If you get to the end of the race and there's two of you very close together, possibly less than 30 seconds apart, but you get that extra lap because you have, you know, you're further ahead because you haven't taken the penalty. If you'd taken the penalty actually under running, you would have been behind the other car, but because you have taken it as an additional time, you still got the extra lap. So you still have 100 laps. But your final lap is 2 minutes and something, whereas the team behind you has 99 laps with the last of 1 minute 30. So it effectively means you've actually got an extra lap, even though that extra you've got is very slow. So you'll be the last of the people on that extra lap. Yeah. However, that extra lap will take you past people probably, and that is the situation that actually did affect people in. I think they say Mugello in that year. I don't think it was the winner. I think it was second and third were not as they should have been because of that rule. But I can't remember it happening since then, but it's always a possibility. And all the teams, just to show obviously that is what works, none of the teams take their penalty in the last 2 hours. They always let them run on. So everyone thinks it's an advantage not to take it. Yeah,
true. I mean, I remember you saying that this is something that's found in RC racing quite a bit because you're dealing with much more lappery. The lap's relatively short there. And as soon as a car, you know, has plus laps or is plus laps down, you can't really separate them that easily. But one of the arguments we put to Gary 3-4 years ago, whenever it was, you know, from a spectacle point of view, wouldn't it have been great if that Renault RS01 had to serve the penalty in race, and then that all of a sudden creates an on-the-track battle? Because they might have, you know, it might have returned, having served the penalty, to no longer be laps ahead. No, it's actually reset the first and the second place cars to be on the same lap, and then you've got a battle for the last 10 minutes to the line. So it's tough. I realise to write the regulations to generate that situation is difficult, but I think we got Gary thinking anyway as to how we may go in the future. Although interestingly, I think the rules are still the same. Yeah, no, he was interested for that breakfast conversation, and then
he's happy to listen to us, and then
of course.
And he'll turn around and say that's a good idea. That and you know, if we're very, very honest, Creventic have listened very well to what we've said on a number of occasions about a number of things, and several things being enacted, and also we've sat there and gone, this is a ridiculous idea, and then it's been explained to us why it's in place. We go, oh yeah, that makes actually perfect sense. Because oddly, this is really true. Johnny and Johnny, you and I aren't always right. Can you believe that?
I can't believe that for 1 second. I can't believe that you're not always right.
Well, you know, it's been a long learning process, but now in my 56th year, I finally admitted there is a very rare occasion when I'm not.
Jürgen Hering back on board the 92 car. That's the engine note you can hear in the background. And he changes down through the gears to get the car thrown into Tora VIP. Jürgen, the man who started the race for the 92, and they qualified in second position. But now, far more importantly for that crew, lead the race and are looking to try and be mistake-free. They don't need to push like crazy here with the advantage that they've had. Just drive within themselves, and Jürgen will know how long he's got to do. But I would imagine, you know, till the end of this particular stint, which only started 5 minutes ago for Hering, but he can do the best part of an hour on fuel. Then it remains to be seen whether they put somebody else in. But Marco Seefried strikes me as a good driver to be in for the final stint. Possibly Tim Muller as well. Although, to be honest, across the board there, it's a very reliable quintet. Taki Constantinou did a fair bit of driving after the Jürgen Hering initial stint yesterday, and some overnight as well. And Michael Hughes has been a bit of a revelation for me too, posting the car's fastest lap at the time in one of the overnight stints. The pristine looking Cayman.
That's in too soon.
Well, I thought it was for Mulner Motorsport. Yeah,
he's been stationary. Whatever they've done, it hasn't involved tyre change. He's been in for not that long. He's been sat down in the pit so far for just a minute and a half, but that definitely wasn't any form of a standard stop. That was an additional stop for some reason, not sure what it was. In the background, serving a penalty is our third place car, the 921, Moritz Kranz in the Mulner Motorsport car, in the Porsche 991 class. And he's probably picked up virtually all these penalties are for track limits. Constant abuse of, and it's going to be a full stop. And you can see they've laid out they've laid out the driver, they've laid out the tyres and the driver, and he'll pull into his pit stall, and there'll be a full service in a second for the Porsche. Yeah, I mean that's I wonder what that 1 minute, that little stop there for the for Daniel Schwerfeld was in the Mulner Motorsport. That was interesting. Very short. I mean, I could be wrong. John's got the strategy software, but obviously we're just trying to reconnect it at the moment. But that did seem from memory that they've been in quite recently, because we were talking about them. But time flies when you're having fun, so it could be ages ago.
Daniel's stint length only 22 minutes, nearly 23 now. So that's when Daniel actually went into the car. So well short. I mean, those Caymans can probably easily do an hour.
Hour and a quarter,
yeah. Okay. So more dictated by how much the driver's got left on the stint time, rather than the fuel left in the tank come the second stop. You're going to have to stop at least once during your stint and maybe keep that driver on board, and then the next stint will have to be a park stint, because the driver's going to run up against their drive time limit, which is still... Now, I remember the days when it used to be 2 hours. I think you said it was 3 yesterday, though. So has that changed?
Yeah, no, the stint length, I think, has gone up.
Right.
Though now you're saying it, I'm just wondering whether I have got my series confused, as we do a lot of things, and whether it is still 2 hours. I'll have to check.
It was always 2, but
I'm not sure if Paul's listening to us, but we saw a couple of go over 2, didn't we?
Yes, we did. I think that's a good point. Yesterday, yes, and
whether
they changed for it. So
whether they've changed it. Rules for extraordinary circumstances, I'm not sure, but you're absolutely right. It used to be 2 hours, and they used to play chicken. They used to play kind of chicken with that 2 hour limit, didn't they? Because there was a kind of a situation where if there was a code 60 on that lap, you would have an issue, because they would take it down to the wire. So that's an interesting point. Actually, I think we need to have a little look into that, and I'm not sure if I've got those particular regs, but yeah, it may well be there's been a slight supplementary reg, because certainly some had 2 hours 15 up yesterday, didn't they, in their timings for their stint length, but you know. Interesting. No,
I'm pretty sure that is the case. I just wonder whether it's been made deliberately more awkward, so that 3 hours is a more difficult figure to play with. They do a lot of that in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship as well. The race durations are deliberately designed so they don't fit into the stint lengths. So there's got to be some strategy weaved in, and different ways that you can approach the race. So there's not always a kind of set way to get a victory, which I like. So Jürgen Hering over the line, and that's another lap in the book. We're not a million miles away from 700 laps up, another 18 circuits, and we'll be there. And the other thing,
your prediction was what, 7:28? You were saying hours ago. You said 7:28.
Yeah,
it might still be there. Actually, it might be over that.
Very nice of you to say it was my prediction. there was a fair bit of software being used that I haven't designed.
No, you're Mystic Johnny. It's fine. You can see the future.
I mean, the other reference point is last year's race that ran to the full 24 hours, 721 laps completed. 2017, it was 7:22. So if we can get to 7:23, that would be a record for Portimao 24 hours. Admittedly, this race only, 4 years old, but nevertheless, it'll be an impressive run for whoever the winner is. And yeah, we're up as high now as 730 laps.
I think that's indicative, of course, mainly of the slightly smaller field. I mean, we've not had a lot of, long-term Code 60, so there's been less Code 60. Now, obviously, the ultimate pace, I would think, when you look at it, what were the two fastest cars in the race in the Winwood Mercedes and the Herberth, both not being there, they were the fastest cars. Obviously, they've so perhaps 3-4 laps more would have been achieved if they were battling the whole way through. But it's that lack of Code 60 that really gives the chance the cars to stretch their legs out. We had 11 hours and 50 minutes overnight of green running. That is a chance to put a lot of laps down and get that distance record, which I'm pretty sure is of concern to no one apart from us.
And possibly your dog, who was getting very excited by that point as well.
Yeah. Say hello to Flo. Yeah,
hello, Flo.
Flo, yeah, she was having it. Someone viciously came to the door. Can you imagine it?
Dreadful. Oh, it's good to have a bit of a security guard on duty, warning you of that fact when you're otherwise disposed.
She's like about 4 kilograms dripping wet. She's not a major deterrent to anybody. Yeah, she might shed some fluff on them, but they really annoy her.
Up the inside at Lagos corner goes the race leader to again just move out of the way some traffic, which would otherwise have been a distraction. That was tricky though for Jürgen Hering, because all of a sudden he was approaching turn 4, which is tough when you're on your own, but approaching turn 4 at a much tighter angle. Difficult to get the rotation required into the 92 car, but he got away with it. Many times I've seen incidents that have sort of started at turn 4 and then fully manifest themselves into turn 5. And over the years, during ELMS weekends, cars have quite readily ended up backwards out of turn 5, which is a little bit alarming for cars then coming through at full chat.
I mean, turn 4, of course, the turn 4, turn 5 areas where there's quite a lot of what's the word for it? Optimism about track limits when you get a fuller field, don't you? The people do look to go cut the inside of 5, and then they find themselves not necessarily gaining what they thought and actually ending up spearing into the back of cars. I've seen that a number of times when people get going, especially actually after the yellow, the full course yellows you get in other series, that they suddenly think, oh, we're all trained together, let's go for it. And I've got off the track, that's great, I've gained a bit now, no, I'll get it. Oh damn, I'm in the back of someone else. Because the weird thing is, other cars have to brake. People do forget that.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of those crucial things you need to remember at times. Autorama car now heading down. Now, is this the number 1, fresh from a gearbox change, or is it the 112?
Yes, it is. They've only got one number in the windscreen. That is the one.
Okay.
You have another runner. Excellent.
So that was Christoph Lenz who brought that car in 2 hours and 20 minutes ago. I'm going to guess that it's not Christoph taking the car back out again, but Autorama Motorsport back to the full complement then of 2 Golfs. And we were suggesting a little while ago, had they given up? Not a bit of it, and keen to get 90 minutes of racing, fingers crossed, in before the checkered flag flies. The 117 Audi is in from 2nd position of the TCE series, so that's Nathaniel Berton bringing the Come To You Team Audi Sport RS3 into the pits.
1 minute 42nd behind the TCE leader, Andy Berry. Still probably within the remit of if you get a mismatch of the drivers driver talents between the Autorama 112 and the Come To You team, because Come To You's got 3 very, very fast drivers, but Autorama didn't seem to have much weak links there, so they're going to have to really push hard if they want to make up that minute and a half. They've got 7:30, so they've still got another 46 laps, I think 45, 46 laps of the leader to go, which are probably about 42 for them. So it's possible, but it's 2 seconds a lap, Johnny.
684 laps done by the race leader, 658 for second place, and compare that to the TCE series leader, 60 odd laps further back. But nevertheless, to get over 600 laps with an hour and a half still to go, as I've mentioned, for Antti Burri and the rest of that crew at Autorama Motorsport, no mean feat. And Nathaniel Beton is within a lap, isn't he? Still just about on the lead lap. No, I mean, not now that the cars come in for the pit stop, but once Autorama call for their 18th pit stop, I'm not sure actually whether that's a pit stop for Come To You that puts them back level again or not, because
no, the stint that Anti's has an hour and 9, so he'll be coming in soon. So
yes.
the levelling one will be when Anti comes in the next 10 minutes or so.
Which would actually put the Golf onto 18 stops and leave the Audi on 17. So they've obviously had an extra stop somewhere along the way, Autorama Motorsport, maybe calling during a code 60.
The real question is whether Autorama can do it on one stop, because with an hour and a half to go, Come To You are almost certainly going to need a splash.
Yes. Just
to get them to the end. Not much, a small splash. But if Antti Burri can come in 10 minutes' time, that'll be it. He'll be able to get whoever takes over will take it to the end.
Yes. Yeah, good point, because the TCRs can easily do an hour and a quarter. Many of them have stretched it to an hour and 25, and on the odd occasion, the full 90 minutes. But
possibly, I mean, that's a very good point. Possibly they have back timed that and Come To You have come in knowing they can get to the end now, because they'll actually emerge with about an hour and 27 to go. So if they have, managed to get the tank topped up by not using it every time and taking their refuel, they may well be able to get to the end without a splash. So that'd be very interesting to see. So it could be both of these now on their last and are running the whole way through.
It's a real stretch, that, but yeah, if you can just eke out a little bit of fuel economy.
Do you remember Rick did an hour 41?
Did he?
Yeah, he did an hour and 41 in the Cooper at actually, no, it was Luke. Luke did an hour and 41 run. I'm not sure how much code 60 was in that, but there was he did a long run yesterday before they had the problem, so it would have been sort of like early evening, 7, 8, 9 o'clock.
And what you can't really bank on at this stage of the race is another code 60, because there's so few cars still circulating. The possibility of incident far less likely than it was in the opening 6 hours of the race, for example. So,
and the 117 team have gone for youth rather than experience. They've picked Nicolas Bert, the 18-year-old Belgian, to take over rather than the slightly more experienced Tom Coronel, the Dutchman.
Yes, at 48 years old.
What a young man he is.
Oh, yes. Well, he's only got 30 years on Nicolas Bert. The number one isn't back to full speed. And presumably that car does now have a new gearbox installed. This might be just deliberately a shakedown lap.
Indicating to pull off. Something's not being connected properly. That's so sad, because they've worked so hard. I mean, I think he might be indicating to say he's going to stay off the racing line and trundle it back in again.
A chance to go to actually listen to the engine note of this car for Stefan Tanner then. Sounds like it's stuck in gear. I mean, not that he necessarily need other gears through this part of the circuit, but there's no gear change into turn 13. Hands up in the air. Very puzzled indeed from Stefan Tanner, who is lapped by the AC Motorsport car. Yeah, again, no movement on the gear stick in the cockpit, and he's going to have to inch it back to the pit lane, where the team will have to look at it again. And you can't quite believe this after so much work over the last 2 and a bit hours. They may be back to square one. Thankfully, he's managed to get from the outside line now, this Portimao circuit, to the inside, because once he's safely gone through Valb, he will veer off to the right and back into the pits, where one of the Porsches from the GT class is also making a stop. But that's a real shame. I'm sure he's on the radio back to the team at Autorama, trying to describe the lack of power that he's got, and the lack of gears too. And they've now only got 85 minutes to try and rectify this. I mean, even if they can get the car out for the last 2 laps, you get the feeling they would try and do it. But have they got the bits necessary for that?
I mean, obviously we think they've just put a new gearbox in. It's the inability to select gears. Of course, this is on a paddle shift, so it could be any number of basic electrical things. It doesn't necessarily mean it's another mechanical gears meshing with not meshing with gears and a whole set of splinters and swarf in your box. But it's just the selection mechanism. It could be a simple thing as they haven't quite put put the selector back in the correct order, or missed a bit out. Let's hope it's something simple, which is in the selector side, rather than running it. And having to take another gearbox out.
978's being pushed down the pit lane now as well, I noticed. That's another car that's been in the wars. Gavin Pickering bringing the Speed Lover Porsche in again for its 22nd stop. Race leaders,
so
interesting.
He didn't actually make his pit box, did he? He stopped. He got into the pits, but then stopped in the lane, not actually at his box.
Okay.
So he was being pushed from. May have been he served a penalty and he couldn't restart it. Or may have just been he just finally ran out of go at that point.
Yeah, I'd actually misread that. Thought it made the stop and then they were pushing it down to fuel. But you're right, it hadn't made the team in the first place. So first job is to open the door and have a quick chat with Gavin to get the diagnosis. It's fired back into life now because the headlights come on. So at least. Yeah. There is some electrical power to the car, and both doors open.
Yeah. No, it's going back in.
They're pushing it forwards and then reverse it into the garage, aren't they? I think
it's been a troubled run for the 978. They still seem to have managed to keep it out of contact with any other cars. Still, it's beautifully clean and relatively and pristine bodywork wise. So. That's always a plus point, isn't it? They haven't actually managed to, haven't got to buy any new panels.
No. Again, 22 pit stops, that I suppose to cars around it on the timing screen, that's a heck of a lot more. But then you look to the leaders who've done 23 pit stops. So, but that's more expected from a GT3 car, which stops pretty much on the hour, whereas a Cayman can do, a 991's Cup car can do quite a bit more mileage before it needs to come in for a drink.
Code Racing have done 580 laps and just 14 stops. They have. So yes. I'm not sure that is less than that. So 620 laps on 17 stops is still more. They're obviously Code Racing are absolutely brimming it and running it to the maximum each time. Yeah. Not obviously quite at the pace of the others, but it's a good tactic. Get in, get your driver settled, tell him to go as fast as he can, however fast that is, and just run till it runs out of fuel. Great idea. Like tactics we use for when we were doing our virtual racing. Just keep going until you run out of fuel.
Well, you know where you are with that strategy, don't you? There aren't any further questions that need to be asked mid-stint, for instance. There's the possibility of a change of strategy when there's a code 60, because there is a decision to be made then whether you come in or not, even if it's just half a tank of fuel. So the number one car's back in the garage as well.
With computers, which normally means it's a selection issue. They're trying to work out and it could be even things like working out having to reset the clutch bite, which is of course is set by computer as well, and computer actuation on the DSG gearbox, on the paddle shift gearbox. The thing you got to hope is it's nothing to do with the metal parts, because that's obviously the expensive bit. This is just the annoying bit. Yeah,
the fine tuning that the laptop can do for you, but it is a question of making sure all of the processes have been done and in the correct order. So, back to a familiar setting for a lot of these crew members of Autorama Motorsport, but at least their other car is still going strongly and very much in contention for the race victory. Antibury put into that car an hour and 18 minutes ago. So we are expecting one more stop from Autorama Motorsport and a new driver as well. And they are enjoying a lead of 2 and a bit laps, which equates to 5.5 minutes now over Nicholas Baert in the yellow and red Audi RS3 of Come To You Team Audi Sport.
Yep. So when Andy finally comes in, that lead will drop down back to around the minute and a half that he had prior. The team had prior to the stop by Come To You Racing. It'll just be a question about whether they can both then reach the end from there, and what Nicholas Bert can do against whichever driver he's up against. Can he pull back that minute and a half, or is it something that's beyond him within those remaining 38, 39 laps or so? Andy Berry was, last time he was a second slower, but we know the Come To You is fast at the start of a run.
Yes. Yeah, and generally Autorama don't go hell for leather in the early part of the stint and tend to want to preserve some life in their Hankook tyres in this first half an hour or so, and then Anti really does come to the fore towards the end. So if that's the general direction of the line on the graph again, then expect the 112 car to be stronger as it comes into the pits rather than at the start of the stint. The AC Motorsport Audi now heading up towards Lagos corner to start off its how many laps completed for that car now? 188. Has done 607 laps, only half a minute behind a GT Series 718 Cayman, but obviously the Cayman's going to be quite a bit quicker. Daniel Schwervelt. 421's also been in for an unscheduled stop recently, Milner Motorsport. But now that car's rejoined the race, things are looking a lot better, so the drama for Schwervelt has been dealt with, you have to think. Quintin Giordano for Code Racing Development, just running very simply all the way through their fuel load and then getting the car in as close to the thing running out of fuel as possible. But yeah, 14 pit stops is mightily impressive from a new team to Creventic. Often the trick to a good result is having the car in the pits for the least amount of time. That suggests they haven't had that many mechanical or electrical dramas either at 124. Gavin Pickering brought the speed level Porsche in 5 minutes or so ago, 9:78. Fingers crossed we can see that car back into the race. The one car has done an out lap, which very quickly became an in lap, and is now back in the pits. Stefan Tanner, at his wit's end, really, are on that very slow lap, hands up in the air, helpless as to rectifying the electrical problem, but many laptops now plugged into that car. And Mariano Pires for Veloso Motorsport, the last car in the race still running, that's car 408, which is currently in 12th position, and the Cayman due across the line any moment now. So all of the teams thinking about when their next pit stop, their last pit stop will be, and have we in fact, in the case of the two TCE series teams, seen, well, one of the cars, the Come To You team Audi Sport, have we seen its last pit stop now? Can Nicholas Bert get that car to the finish? Because that could make the fight for TCE very interesting indeed, because definitely the 112's got to come in for one more stop.
Yeah, I mean, it is going to come down to where they come out of after that stop. Now, theoretically, obviously, every lap that Anti goes round is less fuel that needs to go into the car. So, the fuel stop should be shorter. And as we found out from Paul Trustwell yesterday, the fuel goes in at 0.8 of a litre per second. Now, you can gather, what would you think? They're probably using a couple of litres a lap, probably. So it's 2.5 seconds per lap less fueling you need. So if he does 5 less laps, that's 10 seconds he's saved there.
Yes. Yeah, true. And that's something we'll keep our eyes out for as to how far at the end of this stint Anti can go. Crucial to where that car's going to finish by the checkered flag. But 5 and a bit minutes is going to come down.
Certainly, it's going to come down to about between a minute and a half and 2 minutes, depending on. Well, it's totally assuming, of course, that Autorama haven't made a mistake so far. Managed to actually do a perfect stop, and there's no problems getting the car restarted. There's something to discover initially they didn't know was there. But obviously in the pound seats, the Autorama car, but it'd be interesting to see who they put in the car for that last hour, because they are actually in a race. A minute and a half, with a couple of hours to go, or an hour and a half to go in the endurance race. It's absolutely a race, because so many little things can go wrong. It's so easy to lose 20 seconds with a minor glitch or a slight problem or confusion getting past someone.
Jürgen Hering.
Interesting.
Yes,
Sorry.
yeah, you just
because I was about
the leader, and I was as well. So go ahead with your thought.
Well, the thing about the leaders are they're currently showing with a 52-minute lead. It's not quite that. It's a bit less than that. It's about 47 minutes. But it does mean that actually when we get to 46 minutes, they will have won, because unlike in the race that should have been taking place this week, the proper Le Mans 24 Hours, you do not have to check a flag as a running car to be classified. So, interestingly, and I never remember this happening before at a Creventic event, it could be very likely that we will know who our overall winner, but on the other positions, in about half an hour's time.
Yes, that's a good point. They will have enough sufficient time in the bag to ensure that they take the top step of the podium. The podium celebrations going to take a very different look, quite understandably, to abide by the social distancing rules, but hopefully there'll be a little bit of champagne to spray somewhere in the paddock. A Zoom podium, yes.
Zoom podium, spray the champagne, but nowhere near the computer running the Zoom.
Yeah, I'm going to say, that was a nightmare for your laptop.
Yeah. It's all going so well, I blew up an entire computer system celebrating on Zoom, yeah.
Round the outside now of the 124 Volkswagen Golf goes the race-leading Porsche. That was coming out of Portimao corner through the left-hand sweep at 12 and into a tricky 13, particularly when you have to go underneath the AC Motorsport Audi. But Jürgen Hering doing a very, very good job. Jürgen, very experienced behind the wheel of a Porsche, and he has been part of the Creventic fold for, well, when was his first race? Dubai 24 Hours in 2011. He also did it in 2010, actually, for Land Motorsport. He first started in an IMSA championship in the GT3 Cup for Kinetic Motorsports. That's the first significant motor race I have him down as doing. 53 years old, from Germany, and raced in fact.
What year was the IMSA race?
The IMSA race was 2007. A couple of races he did at Monterey for Kinetic Motorsports. But the other thing I noticed is that he raced at Dubai for Earl Bamber Motorsport, and John and I were a little bit puzzled by the Channel 7 logo on the side of, I think, his car. But that would explain it if Earl brought some sponsorship or some connection with the Antipodean television broadcaster, then maybe it's a hangover of that body shell, that car from the Dubai 24 Hours. Eric Lux, Gerard Lopez, Tim Muller, Jürgen Hering and Will Bamber actually drove that car as well at the Dubai 24 Hours. So now, many, many hours after we first posed the question, might have finally found the answer there.
This is why you should always listen to everything we broadcast, because we'll start answering questions from 4 or 5 races ago soon.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
It takes me that long to find the answer sometimes.
I asked you about the career of Barry Miggins. Oh, yes, Barry. Well, I now know what he did. Yeah.
Which satisfies me, if nobody else.
Isn't it, it's all about you. You know that, Johnny. That's the key point.
Completely, all the time. The 117 goes over the line, and Nicholas Baer then with the crosshair set on the race leader in the TCE series, Antti Burri.
Only gaining half a second a lap at the moment, though. So the last 5 laps he's been consistently half a second faster. But of course, when Antti comes in, whoever takes over will have some lovely new boots to start putting some pace down. Antti now on hour and a half, give or take a minute or so. So he's proving, in fact, in many ways, that the Come To You Audi can reach the end without a stop, provided they manage to get enough fuel in the tank, or allowed to put enough fuel in the tank. But Antti must be getting close to coming in now. To hand over the final stop for this currently 4th place overall Autorama car. But of course, the leader in the TC class and the leader in the TCR class. So that's where our battle is on the track. There's a virtual battle going on at the moment, though, because Hannes Morin in the AC Motorsport is scored as 0.8 of a second behind Daniel Schwerfeld in the Muller Motorsport Porsche Cayman. So Schwerfeld is going to fall out of 6th overall this lap, and 6th overall, though they're in different classes, will go to Hannes Morin in that Audi. So that's going to change places, because last lap round Hannes was 7 seconds faster than Daniel.
Yes. So a very good lap indeed from Hannes there.
Get a feeling, possibly, Johnny, just so to finish that, the thought that I don't know, either Daniel had a problem on that lap, or more likely, is there a situation possibly where he had he's got an issue with the car?
Yeah.
In that we coming in. When we saw it coming in, they looked at it and let it go again. And now I'm just wondering whether they are now driving with a slight problem.
Well, every chance of that, bearing in mind these cars have nearly done 23 hours of running now, so the odd electrical drama will be creeping in for some. We've seen significant mechanical failures as well, engines go, gearboxes, drivetrain related issues as well, and much of them have at least been attempted by the teams to be fixed, and then you realise that actually a full engine change possibly insurmountable in the case of redcamel.jordans.nl, but the 101 will be back without a doubt, because it's almost an ever-present at Creventic Racing, and looking forward to seeing that Cupra again at Monza in around about a month's time. Hannes Morin, though, we talk about from Sweden, another 17-year-old who has come out of TCR Scandinavia, raced with Brink Motorsport there, and also was part of the Dubai 24 Hours for Lestrup Racing, who are a Swedish team, of course, often run their golf with the Swedish flag right on the roof of the car. And Morin having to find a different team to race with this particular weekend, but AC Motorsport have provided that opportunity for him. And up to 3rd place now, having got ahead of Daniel Schwerfeld on that particular lap. 8.2 seconds is the gap between the 3rd place TCE Series runner and the Porsche Cayman class leader, Daniel Schwerfeld for Mühlner.
Daniel's last lap time was 19 seconds off the car's best time. Now, I'm sure that Daniel isn't the fastest driver, but, even the most gentleman drivers can normally get within 8, 9, 10 seconds of the fastest of the car. So I think it's carrying a little bit of a problem.
Yeah.
But not enough to warrant pulling it in, even though they have comfortably claimed their class, because the other GT4 car is over 100 laps behind.
And it may be a problem that they've kind of decided that they'll just run with for the remainder of the stint, see if they can patch it up a little bit in the next stop. But as long as it's not going to create a terminal issue, their target is to get to the end of the race, and you can nurse it home from here with 1 hour and 8 minutes left on the clock. It'll be trying on the old patience levels, but that's part of endurance racing, is to sometimes drive around an issue and just limp the car to the finish to ensure you get a good result.
This is oddly something which is modelled quite well in the virtual world, where you pick up damage on the cars and then you just end up going slower. There's nothing you can do. So you then got 2 or 3 hours where you just have to accept I have to go 3 seconds lap slow, because it's handicapping the car that much. You go, well, come on, it's only pretend, can't you amend it? But no, so you get very upset with the computer. I didn't do anything wrong, why are you modelling me so slowly?
So is that something that can't be improved on then, even if you do choose to repair more damage in the stop? You're just never going to get back to the ideal setup in the virtual world?
Yeah, it entirely depends on the way the program's set, but absolutely, if you have a proper damage model on there, depending how you've broken it, it'll repair you and you'll get to a certain point. Sometimes you can get virtually all the way back, because other times, you're sitting with 2 or 3 seconds of problems. Sometimes you get stuck with a permanent handling imbalance. It does model that rather too well, to be honest. So it's particularly severe in the endurance racing. Some of the sprint races is a little bit more generous, and if you come in to get the car fixed, it will fix it pretty much back to where it was. But if you looked at the Nürburgring 24, which we covered a few weeks ago, of course we're going to cover the Le Mans 24 Hour next week. the proper iRacing on 24 hour with 2,500 teams entered and probably something in the region of 10,000 drivers. We will, by the end, because all the cars had minor incidents with various parts of the track, every single car had a crumpled bonnet because people were looking out kind of like, it looked, rather than looking over a lovely smooth bonnet, it looked like trying to look over the top of the Rocky Mountains to try and see where the track was, because it's, the damage was still there, and the cars looked very second hand. And that affected their overall speed to varying amounts. Sometimes it's pretty much cosmetic. You just lose a tiny amount, 2/10, 3/10. Other times it looks not so bad, but you're just sitting there and the car just won't rev into top gear. It's just lost all its power.
John Hindhaugh digging around for a bit more information on the EBM, Earl Bamber Motorsport Porsche. Will Bamber in the driving lineup at Dubai, as I mentioned. So Earl's younger brother joining Herring, who we're talking about as well, Tim Muller, Gerard Lopez and Eric Lux. Actually plucking out a story from Sportscar 365 about Earl Bamber's Motorsports Porsche 911 GT3R chassis that they'd got from Herbert Motorsport in order to ensure that they could get a car or a couple of cars to the Liqui Moly Bathurst 12 hour as well. So I'm guessing that car at Dubai was rented from Herbert Motorsport, and that's again where there's a bit of crossover, although John's found a sort of screenshot of the car in question. It doesn't have Channel 7 on the B pillar. That might have been added subsequently though, of course. What it does have is the Herring with the umlaut over the A, branding on the doors and the nose of that Porsche, and it is only a promo pick for the Spotters Guide, I think, so might have been missing one or two of its crucial sponsors that were applied when it actually got to the racetrack. That's still the firmest connection that I've found, and the reason why there are Channel 7 stickers on it. The 112, which is the leader in the TCR and TCE series, in
4 tyre change, so they've gone for the longer of the two options. They need two
mixture
men
of
to
wheel
change
colours
the
there, I noticed as well. Silver wheels on the front, black on the rear. Question of what they've got left, I suppose, at this point in the race.
Around, buying them out to Hankook to put a new set of rubber on, because they've got 15 or 16 sets by now, perhaps even more than that with the front, probably the full, what's that, there's 7 to 18 stoppers, so that is their 19th set of front tyres that they've put through, so they probably need to take 4 or 5 sets of rims. The Hankook guys are constantly mounting and balancing tyres all through the race. No one turns up with 20 sets of tyres and gets them mounted before you start. So as they stop for fuel, the only thing is going to be what that overall stop will be. Well, they'll come out. It's only 2 minutes so far, so it's not going to be super long. I think one of the youngsters who got in, so whoever got in seemed to be of a lithe young man outline within his race suit, and not a more, what's the word for it, comfortably shaped gentleman driver, let's say.
I think I'm with you on that. This is lap 700 currently being worked now by Jürgen Herring, so he's due across the line in 10 seconds time, and a significant milestone about to be chalked up. The question is, how much further into the 700 numbers of laps can we get? Can we break the record, which currently stands at 7:22? There goes Herring now to tick off another lap, 3 minutes away from there being just 60 minutes left in this year's edition of the 24 Hours of Portimao, powered by Hankook. AC Motorsport Audi in for its final stop of the race, and Hannes Morin to hand over to one of his teammates. Find out exactly who that is in just a second. This car has completed 615 laps and is still looking good for third place in the TCE series. Choice of Christophe Heymon, Michael Blanchimont or Stéphane Perrin to hand over to. Well, Perrin's been in there just prior to Morin's stint, so I'm going to go with Blanchimont, I think, and that will no doubt prove to be wrong. The 91 Porsche is also in, this time from second position. This is the car that's had work done on it, with a brand new gearbox assembly going in just before half distance. So that car with the pre-coat backing is returning to now the fueling area.
So I looked away for a second there to the timing. Did they change drivers, or has Ralph stayed on board?
I looked away as well, so I would be guessing, I have to admit. But you got to. This is the final stint. Surely they're going to put Robert Renauer back in again. Although we've said that before about Herbert, and actually it turns out to be someone like Ralph Bone or Daniel Alleman because everyone's given an equal billing in amongst that.
And they're not in competition anybody. It's just that they just need someone to turn laps. And they'll be where they're going to be. So I suppose it's a kind of who wants to have a go. Do you want to? No, I'd rather a cup of coffee, to be honest.
The steadily moving target of laps left has now sort of settled around the 732 marker, so that would be firmly record breaking. Thanks to John for the latest information. So we're looking at something like 31 laps still to be completed. We're going to code 60. Now, having said we're not going to get a code 60 in the final 2 and a bit hours, there's one out again, and there are 59 minutes left on the clock. I was about to give you a rundown of the current standings, but are we better to assess exactly why this code 60 is out? Let's run through the standings as quick as we can, and then by the end of those, hopefully we will have a firm indication as to why we've gone into this caution period. 2 hours and 48 minutes, though, of green flag running. Sees the number 92 Herbert Motorsport Porsche leading the way. Jürgen Hering at the wheel of that car, now ticking off 701 laps during our 8th code 60. 27 laps further back is the number 91 car that was Ralph Bone. We'll wait and see whether they've done a driver change there, but the 91 car will get its full allocation of fuel because it was in well before the code 60 struck. So the 91 car will re-emerge from the fueling area in just a second to retake second play or resume in second position. Your own Blake Amolin for Moulner Motorsport leading the 991 class in third place in the GT series. TCE series is still led by Yannick Mettler in the Autorama Motorsport by Wolf Power Volkswagen Golf. So Yannick taking over the 112 car in the last stop. He'll be there then till the flag. Nicholas Bert for Come To You Team Audi Sport is in second position in TCE. Fourth place in the GT series and leading the Cayman class is the Moulner Motorsport 718 spec Cayman with Daniel Schwervelt with his fair share of problems, actually, having done a lap that was about 14 seconds off the pace very recently. So you get the feeling, are driving around a significant issue. Stefan Perrin in the 188 car is now on an out lap, third in the TCE series and seventh when you combine both races. The Code Racing Development Volkswagen Golf is in fourth in the TCEs. Gavin Pickering's Speed Lover Porsche looking suspiciously like it might be a retirement, although that's yet to be confirmed. And then there are 2 more TCE cars on the timing screen at least. However, the number 1 car is still battling gearbox-related problems. It looked like they'd solved them. The car came out for a lap, but then very quickly back in again, and they've plugged 2-3 laptops into the car to try and sort out their gear selection problem. The 101 is definitely retirement. That's the Red Camel Jordans.NL Cupra, out with about 4 hours to go in the race. Mariano Pires still running for Veloso Motorsport, the Porsche Cayman, which is second in the Cayman class. And the final 3 cars on timing and scoring, we haven't seen, well, in the case of the Pro Sport Aston Martin, for 14 hours, and it's even longer than that for the 2 Mercedes, one from Park Alga Racing and one from HTP Windward Motorsport. All 3 of those cars are official retirements. So is this perhaps a Code 60 that's out again for debris on track? No, there's a car that's dealing with recovery, is there, at the start of the start-finish line.
Oh, yeah, there's a car there. There's a car meandering in the very far distance across the track. Can't see one of the cars. Yeah, it is a service vehicle out. Yeah. There is no message up about what Code 60 is about in the very. Look at the debris on the track offline.
Dreadful, isn't it? I know. I mean,
who's to clean that up?
Send the sweeper out now, but you can tell how long this race has been going on for, over 23 hours, because that's an awful lot of Hankook rubber that you could scoop up and probably make 20 odd tyres out of that.
Our leader has popped into the pits to take advantage of a bit of a slurp of fuel to get to the end, Jürgen Harling, so he will now just fill up. He won't need more than half a tank. Also interestingly, we had the final stop for Autorama Motorsport by Wolf Power. They actually unfortunately for them, came out the pits before the Code 60 came out. Yannick Mettler's in the car. Their final pit stop was 3 minutes and 55 seconds, and the final pit stop for the Come To You Audi Sport team was 3 minutes and 55 seconds. So there was nothing gained. So certainly with this Code 60, I'm pretty certain this means that Nicholas Burt and the Come To You team will be able to get to the end on their full tank, their fuel fill as well. So we have a race to the end. However, of course, it'll take a few minutes after the Code 60 unwinds before we find what the actual gap is. Because currently the timed gap is based on the fact they're doing 60 kilometres an hour and not the full racing speeds.
92.
Jürgen out of the car.
Yes, he is. And just walking towards the garage, careful not to be taken out by one of the tyres that was being rolled in by a slimmed down crew or team for the turnaround of that car. It's normally 6 members of the team, 4 that take active part and 2 that are slightly more distant members. Well, that's had to be halved for this running of the Portimao 24 hours to abide by the social distancing rules. So literally just 3 team members on the car, and 2 of those were just rolling tyres and wheels back into the garage. So the Code 60 flags are out. Right? Oh, it's a green flag. No, you're right. Yes. Slightly confused there because I thought it was a yellow flag being waved, but green it is to ensure that we come out of the Code 60. That might have just been to carry out a bit of track maintenance. Maybe some debris reported by 1 or 2 drivers, getting very, very bad indeed. But significant chunks of rubber have been scooped up by that recovery pickup truck that was on the main straight, dealing with tyre pickup at the start of the start-finish line and also towards the end as well. And then eventually it reversed into the safe housing of the Armco overlap. And we can get going again. Yeah, that main straight is very badly affected offline by so many flecks and blobs, handfuls of Hankook rubber. The 112.
And that's just with 15 cars.
That is just with 15 cars, yeah. So a slimmed down but perfectly formed field, still getting a lot of tyre wear. And that will be increasing as the ambient temperature of the day slowly is ratcheted up as we head towards midday. We're now just 54 minutes away from midday and the end of the race.
So just a brief clip there, the 112, Yannick Mettler, still waiting to see what his lead is when Nicholas Burt crosses the line for the next time, which will be in a few seconds' time. Down the straight comes a 91, the only running in the Porsche 991 class. Unfortunately, the Speed Lover machine is back in the pits. It's really had a very, I'll say love-hate affair, just a love affair with the pits. That car's been in and out. Mostly actually when we've been on broadcast. I think when we were away overnight, it was mostly turning laps. So perhaps perhaps the camera is a bit of a jinx on the Speed Lover car.
Or us.
Well, yes, because the car has done 554 laps, but very few of those have been when we were actually on air.
Yeah. Well. At least they are managed to get a bit of mileage in, even though it's out of our viewpoint. And so the difficulty is, you think you've mastered it, and you get in a number of hours of running overnight. Well, we should be able to get to the end here, and then the problems re-emerge then in the daylight hours. A real shame that.
So the key competitive race at the moment, the 4th and 5th place overall, but more importantly, 1st and 2nd in TC and TCR. We now know the gap is 1 minute 21 seconds, so 15 seconds have been gained by the Come To You Team Audi in the process of when the cars went into the pits. They were a minute and 36 apart, and now they've come back out again. It's a minute and 21, so 15 seconds closer, but still, with probably 28 laps now. I'm sure we won't get to 7:32 anymore, probably 7:30. 28 laps to go, 81 seconds to make up. It's 3 seconds a lap at minimum.
Yeah. Oh, that's a very big, very tough ask. So, Robert Renauer doing over 5 hours of running across the 24. 7:29 is now the prediction, as Nick suggested. And that's going to fluctuate a little bit over the final 50 odd minutes, but obviously the main reason it's come down is because of the latest code 60, which appears to have been for debris. Down through that little dip, and then the slight rise, which brings you into turn 1. Very high speed corner, that turns 1 and 2, and then the hard stop comes into 4 at Lagos corner. Track briefly then disappearing behind the bank, which forms a slight incline from 4 up to 5, and there's a significant retaining wall at the back of the paddock as well, which ensures that the earth that had to be built up, I guess, when the circuit was built to give that extra height to the back straight, the earth doesn't penetrate the paddock. But it's not quite the crowbar effect of a paddock being weaved into the old Zandvoort. So I think possibly that's changed a little bit now, but it always wasn't quite an undertaking to get the paddock into position at Zandvoort. You got the feeling between the start-finish straight and then the returning leg coming back from Tarzan's hairpin. There's quite a bit more space to be utilised though here at Portimao.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually that back straight actually was the level of the hill. They've actually carved the front straight into the hill, I think, hence the reason the big retaining wall.
Okay, yeah. So
that it's a good point there. Where did all the earth go? They moved to make the front area. As again, I said, this is a fabulous circuit which uses topography brilliantly. But you kind of wonder how they decided to use this particular bit of, because if you go around the environs of Portimao, it's kind of like rocky, arid scrub, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
You don't look at going, I can see how I can put a track there. So it's taken a lot of vision, and they've just they obviously owned the land. We're going to put a circuit here. And then someone very clever managed to work out how to make it work in a way that was going to be A, engineerable. Though we found out they ended up with a lot of debt after doing it, and B, make a practical solution. But there is a huge amount of earthworks to get the track going.
Yes, but the kind of standout feature of this track, which is the undulation, is for the most part natural, and you're presented with a plot of land which quite clearly can incorporate a lot of ups and downs, and then it's down to the track's designer to extract the best from that. But the result is just a splendid race circuit, which is now in 2020 only just over 10 years old, and yes, it's gone through its various money troubles through the years. Seems to be relatively stable right now though, and set to host some decent meetings before the year is out in a very difficult and unusual year, but at least the calendar can start to get going now. And this again for the circuit was a good acid test, I suppose, with Creventic moving in, willing to run a 24-hour race, okay with next to no crowd, deliberately so, and also with significantly fewer people on site as well, but it's a good start, and then the track can learn a lot from an event like this as to where they might be able to go next in ramping up the levels and trying to return to normal for next season. Tim Muller being put into the 92 car in the next stop. We mentioned Jürgen Haring was stepping out after a solid stint, his final act of this particular race. Daniel Alleman, I did suggest it might either be Ralph or Daniel in for the final stint, so not Robert Renauer, but the Swiss instead, happy to bring that car home in second position. No danger of it losing out on second, but equally far too far away now from the race leader challenge. And is it even possible, I wonder, for the number 91 car to reach the 700 lap marker? He's got 21 more laps to do, so that seems a tough ask as well. Although
he's got 48
probably
minutes.
Possible, isn't it?
Fine. This is less than 2 minutes a lap. He should. No, we don't have any problems. He should. I don't think he might scrape up to about 7:05, 7:06. But the problem is that Tim Muller he's just about on his 706th lap now.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure the Herberth team are disappointed because this reason they're not winning the 91 car is due to that gearbox change they needed to do efficiently and brilliantly in just over an hour. But the icing on the cake for them, the thing which would make the pill less bitter to swallow is their teammates have won. So, there'll be a celebration in the Herberth pit at a respectable distance, obviously, when we get to the end of the race.
Yes, and possibly one or two drivers with gritted teeth at the 91. No, I'm joking. They will have been thoroughly chuffed with a 1-2 finish. And obviously there's a lot of competition within that team, but the best result was always going to be a 1-2, and that's looking very likely now. Ralph Bone, by the way, has done the most driving in that 91 car that currently runs second on the road, 6 hours and 22 minutes. Also, John Hindhaugh working hard on the stats within the TCE series. Two drivers have done over 8 hours in this race. They both come from that category. Hannes Morin, the Swede, in the 188 AC Motorsport car, 8 hours and 4 minutes for him so far. And Nicholas Baert in the 117 Audi has done more than that, 8 hours and 7 minutes. So Ironman stints from both of them. Yeah, Baert, 18 years old.
Baert in the car now, so he's going to get very close to 9 hours at the end of the day. Unfortunately, Yannick Vettler in the Autorama car, the 112 car that's leading TC, hasn't read the script, and he's actually going a little bit quicker than Nicholas Baert. He's actually pulled the lead out to 127. This lap it was about half a second. The previous laps he's pulling out a couple of seconds. He's got fresher tyres, so we are going to need an incident, I think, to pull that one together. But you never can tell. That's the glory of endurance racing. It is still, up until it's not possible, it's still possible for things to go horribly wrong.
No, it's true. And yeah, it can get as late as you want in the race. You think we're home and dry here, and then sometimes within 5 minutes of the flag, or think about Toyota at Le Mans a few years ago, on to the final lap of the race, and then drama hits. And that was obviously far more consequential because of the rules run at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, as in you need to be still running and getting over the line under the car's own steam, own power. Don't have that rule in Creventic racing. So we're getting to a situation now where the 92 can pretty much seal the victory in the next 5 minutes or so, because it will have done so much more mileage than everybody else that 710 laps marker, let's say, as it will be, is uncatchable.
The car on the pits at the moment is the Veloso Motorsport, the local Portuguese Cayman. Mariano Pires took it in. Now, there's about to be a major milestone for this car when it comes out and completes another lap, because it will actually move up one place in the overall race results, not to 11th overall, because it will get past the Red Camel Jordan's car. It's currently timed as being 5 hours, 21 minutes behind, but on the same lap. So after that long stop and retirement for the Breukers team, they are about to drop down to 12th overall, because once the 408 car gets cross start finish one more time, they will take 11th overall.
Sadly, the lower end of the timing screen doesn't look too healthy at all now, because we've got the letter P next to the 9th place car all the way down to 15th. Now, I know all about the Aston Martin and the two Mercedes that have been propping up the order since late last night, but other difficulties now becoming more often, or more frequent problems for Quinton Giordano and Gavin Pickering. Giordano's car has just arrived. That's all right. Okay.
Standard stop for Giordano.
I'm getting sucked into the fact that one may have the same trials and tribulations as the ones below it, but no, it's just the fact that it's effectively the last running car, and yes, should rejoin very quickly. Fingers crossed. Gavin Pickering's Speed Lover Porsche brought in 45 minutes or so ago, and the same actually for Stefan Tanner's Volkswagen Golf. The 421 was back on the move.
The Golf, of course, Johnny, was after having been in for 2 hours 50 minutes, and then they actually did one lap and then came in again, because their gearbox change then led to wasn't completely done properly because they had selection issues. So they've now effectively, really, apart from one quite pleasant lap, spent the last 4 hours in the pits.
Yeah. So
yes, we have lost Bryce Ward of the HP Winwood team. We have lost the Park Lager racing team. So that's both the Mercedes in GT3 and GT4 format, the 412 and the 84. We have lost the 401, the Aston Martin Vantage of Pro Sport Racing. And we have lost the Cupra of Luke Breukers and the Breukers team, Red Camel Jordan. Those are definitely out. it's questionable whether Stefan Tanner in the number 1 auto-run will get going again. Gavin Pickering and Speedlane, well, they've been giving it a go all the time, coming in, coming out. So you hope they'll be going. And the other 2 cars currently in the pits, Mariano Perez in the Veloso Motorsport, that's definitely back underway again, and it's just in the fuel stop. And I believe the same for Quinton Gordano. So we should be up to the full complement of 9 runners, actually running runners, very soon, John.
That's good, yeah. So it's just slightly misrepresentative, the timing screen right now, painting a bleaker picture than is actually the case, because Quinton Giordano's now in the fueling area in the black and green Volkswagen Golf. 188 Stefan Perrin installed for the final stint in his AC Motorsport Audi. That car on for a podium within the TCE series and firmly within the top 8 as well of both races combined. Up the hill to turn 13 goes Perrin now, and through the tricky uphill left over a slight rise, and then you start to drop down quite considerably actually. And that particular camera angle gives you an illustration of the drop through Sagres corner right in front of those large tribunes, and also the speed differential between the 188 Audi and the number 91 Porsche, which zips by on the inside of Valp corner to tick off another lap. That's the second of the Herbert Motorsport Porsches, then being driven by Daniel Alleman.
Oh, it's very rare you refer that as the second of the Porsches, isn't it?
Yeah, I know, and they won't like that one bit.
The 91
either.
car's never the second of the Porsches. It's
isn't.
always in our mind it's the lead one. Obviously, it's not.
Well, I think we may have seen that in the past with car collection Audis as well. We get more and more used to the 34 car, let's say, outperforming its teammates. But I do remember, I think, a race at Imola in recent years where their roles were reversed. And, yeah, the normal kind of metronomic reliability from a set squad is just off for whatever reason. I mean, this particular weekend it's because of a mechanical drama, and a big one at that, with a gearbox change required on the 91 Porsche. But Herbert bringing some strength in depth to Portimao, and you know, they lose the ability to win with one car, but thankfully the other one was waiting in the wings to take up the mantle. And a penny for those involved at Scuderia Praha, whether they had any idea that they may be part of this race, not sure. You've got to think that if they're utilising a Ferrari 488 as they do, then Monza's got to be on the radar to be involved with that particular race. But I do realise that from a logistical point of view, it's more tough to get a race and a team to a racetrack in this current era. So
yeah, Czech Republic to Monza is not a difficult run. I mean, it's a few miles, but it's not. It's obviously a much bigger truck run to come down to the south of Portugal. You know,
and the fact you've got to travel through Spain, which could have been tricky as well.
Yes.
This close to the worst of the pandemic in Spain itself, and the picture getting better and better now in the northern part of Italy. So yeah, the drive down to Monza will be a pleasant one, you have to think. And let's hope that those at Scuderia Praha and drivers Matteo Magliucelli, Josef Kral, and I've forgotten the third driver.
Yuri Piziak.
Thank you. Yuri Pisaric, of course, who has so much success here at Portimao over the last 3 years. Victorious in 17, 18 and 19.
Car stopped on... Is that car with the problem stopping, or just the 124 there suddenly had no momentum at all?
Right. Yeah.
Thierry Chonkandili from Code Racing just was parked on the stop. Saw another car coming up, going again. I'm not sure what his issue is, but it looks like there's an issue right at the end of the last 40 minutes for the core racing development Volkswagen Golf. We did say it was just going to be a standard stop a few minutes ago when you were trying to write it off as dead, Johnny, but it's now looks like you may have your, well, not your wish, you may have your fear.
That was a bit of preemptive commentary, wasn't it? Or the curse of the commentator, quite possibly. And the Porsche that got caught behind the slowing Golf was stuck in two minds whether to go right or left, and they got very close indeed at Lagos corner. Thankfully that Porsche was able to wriggle free.
Moving now.
Yeah, as I say, is that it coming out of Tour VIP?
It doesn't now seem up. It seems to me visually up to pace again now. So Did he have was he recovering from an incident we hadn't seen at turn 4, where he basically made a pig's breakfast of it and was just recovering, and therefore, or had he, well, it looks a bit slow again, or has he got selection problems or power issues? He looks fine downhill.
Funny that, yeah. Although the run out of turn 6 is very much uphill, and it was doing okay. And now to Portimao, the car looks to be back to full speed. So much gesticulation down at the team because they're not quite sure what to do here with the Code Racing development Volkswagen Golf. Do they bring it in as a matter of precaution, or has it coughed and spluttered the problem out of the exhaust, and can it carry on again now? I think still it's doing all right, isn't it?
They're safe in 4th place. That's not. They can, if they have plenty of time, if they want to just bring it in and have a look at it. But that was one of those strange situations where it was coughing and spluttering almost, but I'm sure it wasn't fuel. There'd been an electrical cough or splutter, or a gearbox cough or splutter. But that must have been quite a hair-raising moment when you see yourself barreling towards a semi-stationary Volkswagen Golf and you're driving a Porsche, trying to get a very good result in a race.
Yes, yeah, because the speed differential's high enough already before you then drop the Golf back to pretty much walking speed as it was out of turn 4. So less of a concern now, that slow going.
And they are going to pits.
Okay.
So he's gone into the pits. He gets the fun of serving a penalty first.
Yes.
He's chuffed about that.
So, well, let's hope the car can restart and move away from the penalty box now and head up to the team. So heart and mouth moment here as well for Code Racing. Thierry.
You usually see what happens when they actually get the pit. Is it open the door, plug the computer in, or is it open the bonnet and go, what on earth's going on?
It's a choice of the two. At least it's able to pull away from the penalty box.
Yes, it's missing the ability to go fast. It's not missing the ability to go, isn't it?
No, that's true.
Well, maybe it's missing the ability to go fast regularly. Maybe it can go fast at 2 corners and not fast the 3rd corner.
Yeah. An intermittent issue, which at the very worst means the car drops back down to limp mode. Is it even going to stop with the team? Or have they just come in for fuel? So was it...
Was you ran out of fuel?
Maybe it was, that the tank was getting particularly empty.
But they were just in earlier.
Yeah. So a fuel pump problem, or maybe the fuel just didn't go in because there was an issue with the pistol grip trigger. I don't know.
And
it's not even gone into fuel. That's weird.
So he's gone in, stopped for a penalty, trundled down the pit lane, which is a very inefficient way of serving a penalty, and gone back out again.
That doesn't make any sense at all. So that's a very strange one. Well, let's see whether, unless of course the driver thought, well, as he came into the pits and thought, do you know what, the problem's solved here, but I might as well serve a penalty whilst I'm here.
His last lap was timed at 7 minutes 51 with a 3 minute 30 with about 1 minute and 10 in the pit. So we missed some more slowness of that lap prior to that.
Yeah.
So it's very strange.
Yes. Well, the 124 has rejoined and will stay in 8th position, 4th place in TCE. And next time around, we'll tick off 600 laps for that touring car. 7:12 now completed by the race leader. 6:86 for Daniel Alleman in the 91. And 3rd in the GT series is the Mühlner Motorsport Porsche Cup car of your own Blake Amolin, who found himself with a free weekend and a chance to actually drop away from his normal GT3 mount, of which there have been several through the years, and get back into a Porsche Cup car. So a little bit of reconditioning, I suppose, of the brain to work out where the strengths and weaknesses are of that particular 991 spec Porsche. Well, probably only taken him about a quarter of a lap, and he's pretty much then on the cusp of a very good lap time. And I'm sure he's enjoyed his weekend to this point. Your own Blake Amolin, again, someone who's been putting in plenty of shifts in the overnight spell.
Yes, it's been absolutely a case of your own who made a last-minute decision to come down here. It must be a thing I need to just knock the rust out of my system, because normally I'm racing every weekend, sometimes twice, so this 12-week layoff is ridiculous. I need to work out if I can still do it, and the answer is yes, you can.
And sort of in the vein of a number of other drivers as well, happy to race anything really. You know, I could have seen him in a TCR car as well. And Sebastian McMullen, his brother, has driven TCRs in the past.
I mean, this is obviously is a fine way of getting your iron, but also we are now seeing reports of all the drivers in major series trying to do a bit of karting or doing a bit of Formula 3, or if you're Lewis Hamilton, you get to run a day in a Mercedes F1 car at Silverstone. But they're all trying to get a little bit of real world action, real world G-force, just get that kind of fresh air concept of how you drive again, because I think they're not used to being out away from the wheel for so long, and you just need to recalibrate your brain, also get those muscles moving which you use in the car. Because you even how much fitness work you do and how many times you're running up and down a field or cycling 40 miles or doing the various machines, it's not exactly the same as driving a car. So by being thrown around a bit, you get the loosening in the old joints, or obviously for a lot of these drivers are the young joints. And you get the ability to get your iron. I think it's really important. I think it's difficult to stress. Even professionals, they will pick up some rust over a few weeks of complete inactivity. It's not the same as the off season. You can go and do other things, and they have also been cooped up in their houses with their sim rigs and wives, children, dogs, and girlfriends. So a bit of fresh air and a bit of chance to drive something must be great relief.
Yeah, and I suppose that. Well, first of all, the off period of a season over the winter in the Northern Hemisphere is becoming shorter and shorter now, because there's always somewhere, there are races in December, there are races in January and February as well to partake in. But also, in growing up as a racing driver, you've kind of become used to that pause in proceedings at around about that time of year. So that's more so conditioned in the body. But what is not something you're used to is doing no real world racing for all of March, April, May, and the bulk of June as well. So it does take some getting over.
If you haven't been lucky enough to do a couple of the events coming through in, as you say, in January, Dubai or Daytona or perhaps Bathurst, it's quite possible that some of these guys haven't driven competitively since like last November, or perhaps last October even.
Yeah. So, entirely possible.
And therefore, you do sit there going, some of it's like riding a bike, but some of it does need to be re-muscle learned, doesn't it?
Yeah. So this has hopefully provided a real tonic for those desperate to get back behind the wheel of a racing car, and in competitive format as well, rather than just a private test somewhere. I know the testing part of the season got going quite a bit before this, but finally a chance for an international motorsport meeting and to go back to the full metal format. Into turns 8 and 9 goes the white, green and red car of Veloso Motorsport. That's the white, green and red of the Portuguese flag, though, more so than it looks very Italian, that livery. But they are a Portuguese outfit, and Paulo Pinheiro doing the driving there in the Cayman GT4 Club Sport R408.
He was a little more acquainted with that first Apex on Portimao than a lot of the other cars are.
Yes.
I'm sure if you're a racing instructor, you've been holding your head in your hands watching the various lines through 11, but it seems that different cars find different ways of making that particularly strange combination of uphill, gentle right, sharp right, downhill combination work. So it's kind of like a wide open hairpin at the same time as being off camber, on camber, and uphill and downhill at the same time. So it's got everything in two corners, hence the reason no one's quite worked out what is the obvious finite line for each car to be the same.
Yeah, there does appear to be no obvious right way of going through that sequence of corners, but it's interesting to watch some rather radical lines delivered by one or two of the cars. Into the pits is now the 921. Can barely read that race number now because of the flecks of rubber that have appeared over the last 23 and a bit hours. But this is the Jeroen Bleekemolen car then in from third position in the GT series. Jeroen is going to clamber out and hand the car over to a fellow teammate for the final run to the flag. So no real hint of back timing here. They're just running it out of fuel and going to give it half the allocation required now.
They have got a 119 lap lead over a car that's in the pits. So I think at this point they'd probably go right. One of the guys is probably, they've had a chat in the pits and say, whoever, do you want to take it to the end? Yeah, I'll take the end, and I'll take it over the line and Jones done that enough to go, yep, I'll get out, and let's let whoever gets in the car just take it over the line and enjoy that part of the race. Starting the car, that's one of the qualifying the car, starting the car, finishing car. Those are the three kind of ticks you want to do if you're a driver. Obviously, the qualifying part normally goes to the guy who's the quickest. The starting the car should go to the guy who's the safest, and the finishing car should go to the guy who pays for it, normally.
Unless you're in a stonking fight and you want to put your qualifying driver back in again, but there's not really the need to do that right now. I wonder whether Carlos Vieira will be put back into the car for the final run to the flag. Maurice Krantz has been at the wheel of that 921 for a number of stints, and Tom Cloet as well. His fair share has been delivered for the 44-year-old Belgian. So it's gone to fueling, and we'll come back out on track for one last hurrah. We've got 25.5 minutes still to go. A bed on wheels, that's an intriguing design for a chariot that has been put into one of the garages. Not sure it necessarily will roll in and out though, but a chance for some rest after some hard work over the last 24 plus hours, because of course these cars will have had to be prepped and run in qualifying as well on Friday by the mechanics, and although they've been working at an appropriate distance from each other, actually slimming down the team means more work per head, you have to think. So I'm sure a very tiring weekend had by many of the behind the scenes workers here in Portimao. But a chance as well for them to knock some rust away, of course, too. And I'm sure they're desperate to, well, they've probably still been working on cars in every corner of Europe. But much more exciting to have to turn a car around, a gearbox change, let's say, under pressure, knowing the clock is ticking in the background for real. 717 laps now done, and the leading margin still about the same, 53 minutes and change to Daniel Alleman's sister Herbert Motorsport car. Tim Muller, though, best placed, very nicely placed, in fact, for a race victory and a first Porsche victory in the Creventic history of the 24H series. Out of Sagres corner now goes Yannick Mettler in the TC Series leading car.
He's now 1 minute and 43 seconds ahead of Nicolas Bert. So Yannick obviously is the one of the quicker of the Autorama drivers with Antti Burley, and he's taking the car home for what's going to end up being a well-deserved victory in this class. But interesting, at the start they were definitely the third fastest of the cars, slower than the Come To You Audi, slower than the Red Camels Jordan, but in true endurance form, they really found their pace sort of overnight. When Red Camels Jordan obviously had their own issues, but they managed to put some space on the Come To You team, and the Come To You team doesn't have a weak link in its driver lineup, so that's been done by hard work and pure pace and tactics to get the car nicely ahead during the night.
Daniel Schwervelt's brought the Cayman from Müllner Motorsport back down the pit lane, 421. So I still think they're battling one or two gremlins. It's come in for, well, first of all, to serve a penalty at the start of the pit lane. They're now going to switch drivers, so Schwervelt out. And that car will be given a little splash of fuel. Not much required, though, now to get it through the final probably 20 minutes or so, as it will be when it actually gets back to track. Schwervelt and Sartingen have been at the wheel quite recently, so it'll be one of the other three drivers being installed.
Carlos Vieira has taken over the Müllner Motorsport Porsche. Are you predicting? Yeah, that's very good. Excellent, well done.
Thank you.
You should be the team manager.
It was just, that was the name that I remember sort of being in the car the least, really, or most recently the least. So, made sense, possibly on the rotation. And 921, yeah, as you say, rejoining. 421 still in the pits. Paolo Pinheiro for Veloso is back in the race. Gavin Pickering and Stefan Tanner sadly looking like retirements now, to add to the 101 Red Camel Cupra and those three cars that have been at the tail end of the field for nearly 15 hours now.
Quite interesting. If we do end up at the back of this with 6 of the cars effectively retiring out of 15, that's a very high attrition rate, because you wouldn't expect to lose 12 out of 30. So we've had a bit of bad luck actually in the reliability stakes. Or is it a case that, because these cars have been parked up for months, they've been more, kind of keyed, they've had more chance of developing a gremlin that has been hard to fix out. I mean, there's no reason why they should go off in 4 months of inactivity whatsoever. But I'm surprised we've lost this many cars. Only one really down to an accident, which is Bryce Ward. The rest through gremlins. The reliability of modern cars, modern race cars, is remarkable. You think with a field of 40 or 48, which we've had at Creventic race, you don't never lose much more than half a dozen or 8 of those, do you?
Oh, no, and it is unusual, definitely, to have such an attritional race. I'm trying to remember what the problem was for the GT4 Mercedes.
The rear end locked up. They said it might have been the result of accident damage prior, but what ended up happening was something in the rear end seized up. Hence, we had those big black lines down the.
No, that was the Aston. That was the 401 Aston.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I do apologize. The part line we've never found out.
No.
It went when we were in our first break, after covering the first 3 hours, and then we had there was a TV break for a couple of hours. At that point, it was just in the pits, I think, for about an hour, and we never found out what the issue was. I don't think it was an accident, but because we haven't had any information on that front. But obviously when you've got 15 cars losing 6 is a bit of a pain, but it's interesting technically why you would hit this extra attrition levels, because that's over a third of the cars are broken down to a point where they're not running. Not that they've had a problem and they've chunted out again, which is what tends to happen in 24 hours. You see loads of cars that have had an hour for something, and they've had the engineers poring over the laptops for an hour, but they still end up running quite happily at the end for the last couple of hours. So if you think about that would be the same as going to Dubai and losing 35 cars. Just stopped.
Yes.
So I know with a small field, statistics can get very easily warped by one or two things happening that shouldn't. But it's just it's back to the world. You do expect perfect reliability these days, really, don't you? And when someone doesn't have reliability, certainly it takes them out of the whole race. When they rather than just an hour, it's always a surprise.
The other thing with Dubai is that, in recent years we've had 70, 80, sometimes 90 starters. Then the first couple of hours can be a bit of carnage, just as really the track decides how many cars it's comfortable with having running on it. Most of the retirements early on are down to actually crash damage rather than reliability issues. We've had very little of that here this weekend, I'm delighted to say. That's again part of the reason for that is we only had 15 starters, but Bryce Ward's incident looked to be all on his own, maybe running out of brakes on the run up the hill towards turn 13. So driver error seems the most likely, although having not had the chance to chat to him since that problem, it seems a little bit harsh to label that for sure. Could have been something fail on the car, brakes, or indeed a stuck throttle, but the damage to the nose after it landed in the tyres at a fairly decent speed, proving too much in the end for the team to fix. 720 laps now completed. Just hearing actually that Park Alga's problem was overheating related. So thank you to John Hindhoff.
That means
bit of research.
Effectively, if you overheat it and you can't get the bottom of it, you end up either you've got two things you can do. You can try and fix the overheating, or it's too late and you've done the engine or the heads. Yes. So it sounds like probably that, because they stopped very quickly. If it was something that was fixable, and in the cooling system, those cooling systems work naturally, so it would only be something like an airlock or a problem with a fan or something, which would be fixable. Therefore, it must have overheated and done some damage that they couldn't fix the track. But again, that's a mechanical, and that's interesting. Of course, we have to remember they've all had some running prior to this, so they've not just unloaded from the truck and chucked them in a 24-hour race. But it's an interesting amount of attrition, which is wonder whether they'll be repeated in other series, or it's just an outlier. As I said, with a small sample field, it can get very heavily warped by just one or two outlying things happening.
No, that's true. Yeah, and it's not necessarily the rule, also the exception. But looking forward to getting a lot more real races under our belt so we can fully assess that.
Well, we have, of course, before we have the next round of the Creventic Championship in the 10th and 11th of July, which I'm actually looking forward to, and I'm confident we have at least 30 entries for. We have the super weekend of July the 4th, where everything's running. So we'll know what motorsport's like by then, because you've got IMSA, you've got IndyCar, you've got NASCAR and F1 all running on the same weekend. So we'll have a perfect idea then of how people are coming back from. A lot of those are their first races or back as well. So there'll be a good idea about how people have managed to stop their carbon fibre from rusting overnight.
Yeah, and across various disciplines too. So yeah, that will give us a good tester. Or good data, should I say, to feed back into the remaining part of the season. But yes, if we can bolster the entry for Monza and maybe get double the amount of cars that we've had here at Portimao. And part of the reason why there are 15 entries was a logistical point of view. You don't want to flood the pit lane full of race teams. And the other part of it was physically to actually get to this race was quite an undertaking. So, 15 cars on a grid is most impressive considering the current situation. And it's a good base to build on, for the next few European races, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, this was always the most difficult because it was the first. It was kind of if we build it, will they come, and will enough of them come to make it worthwhile, and they did, and Creventic backed that by not only just putting on a race, but we're not here, but we're covering it. The 0221 are there with the pictures. We're putting it as close as we can get within the current climate to the same sort of standard quality of coverage we would be able to give if we were actually on the site in the races. It's being reported that its social media activity is still the same, so it's giving all the value it can to the entrants. But it was a difficult judgment for the entrants to go for it. It's a much easier decision to make now. You know it's all working. You know how it's going to do. You've seen the test event to go, right, can I get my car? Do I have the finance? Do I have the desire to get my car to Monza in July? And outside of the 2 or 3 Portuguese teams are here, you pretty much be guaranteed that everyone who's done this race is going to be up for doing the next one. Plus, there's a huge tranche of cars who've entered Creventic events over the last few years, many of whom don't have a series to go to at the moment, or haven't had their sub-series announced, who they think, well, no, or may want to get the rust knocked out of their race teams as well, and will realise that when they come to race in their own series, they'll also be running under a COVID-based pit lane regime. At that point, it becomes even more attractive concept to actually just let's do a very nice 12-hour race in the lovely sunshine in Monza, put Monza under our belts, and another classic circuit, one of perhaps the 3 or 4 classic circuits of Europe. It gets to be a much more attractive proposition, mainly because it's going to happen, and it's going to run well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, very much so. You've got to pick where is the most appropriate area of the continent to go racing from a safety point of view, and then slowly build upon that. I notice the laps completed now for the race leader, 723, which does break the record set 3 years ago, and therefore, in this relatively young story of the 24 hours of Portimao, we do have a new distance record. So that's something, a significant feather in the cap for those writing press releases for Creventic. Not only can we put a race on, we can also blow out of the water the distance record as well. And congratulations to all involved at Herbert Motorsport for doing that. Still looking like they will finish in the 1-2 positions, because remember, you don't even have to be running come the checkered flag. It's all about the mileage that you've put in before that. And we are going to get the second place car to the 700 lap marker as well, and a little bit beyond that. Nick's suggestion that we might get to 7:05 looks very accurate indeed for the number 91 Porsche of Daniel Allemann and Ralph Bone, and the 2 Renault twin brothers. Carlos Vieira, Portuguese driver for the Belgian Mulner Motorsport team, running around in 3rd position in his class-leading 991 Porsche. And Yannick Mettler and Nicolas Baert still not very far from one another, less than a couple of minutes between the Volkswagen Golf of Valterrama Motorsport and the Audi of Come To You Team Audi Sport. But those 2 cars looking unlikely to change positions, running 1st and 2nd in TCE, which puts them 4th and 5th in the overall standings. And Stefan Perrin in third place after 636 laps completed for another Audi RS3. So it's going to be the VAG based cars that are first, second and third in the TCEs. And sadly, 2 of those entered TCEs won't get to the finish. The number 1 car with major gearbox problems, and the Cupra from Red Camel Jordans.nl needing a full engine change, which the team realised wasn't going to be possible in what was only 4 hours of the race remaining at the time. We've got 11 minutes left on the clock though, so now just a matter of trying to keep things as clean as possible. Daniel Alleman with the AC Motorsport Audi to deal with, which he does so neatly into turn 12, and now there's clear road in front as he heads up the hill into turn 13. Alleman often put into this car though to finish off the race, can deal with quite a bit of pressure. I remember him not only being put into that car, you know, with a kind of 20-minute advantage, and in this case a nearly 55-minute advantage, but also sometimes put into the Herbert Porsche with a battle on his hands too.
Yeah, I mean, we discussed this, I think, earlier. It is interesting. The Herbert Porsche has a pro driver in Robert Renau and a semi-pro in Alfa Renau, who are both really, really, really quick Porsche drivers, on the cusp of being Porsche Junior drivers. Robert's obviously running IMSA. You know, they are top GT3 911 drivers. And you have Ralph Bone and Daniel Alleman, who are very, very good gentleman drivers at the top level of gentlemen, but they aren't as quick. But there is never, ever a thought that the Herbert 91 team will not even the racing out, give them the same number of hours each. They don't suddenly just jump in and put somebody else in because they're a bit quicker. Occasionally they'll as you said yesterday, they'll often hold back the Renauer twins to see what it happens in the second half of the race, and then won't use their hours. So we'll see a lot of Ralph and Daniel at the start of the race. They'll click off a load of hours, and they've done what they need to do, and you've got 6 or 7 hours to go, and the guys wouldn't need to go back in the car for any sort of time basis, but because they have such confidence in them, they still end up doing hours, even though they could have been to the theoretically faster drivers. And that's a very different plan than you see from most of the other semi-pro GT3 teams, who absolutely will maximise their fastest drivers, and many completely minimise, just try and get the minimum 2 hours out of the guys who are, you know, in inverted commas, the slowest.
Yeah. Yes, many times I've seen gentleman drivers who are often bringing the funds to a team, literally doing their 120 minutes, and then stepping away and becoming, you know, a fan of the team, a spectator, to witness hopefully a podium result, but very much not taking an active part once they've done the bare minimum. But that's not the protocol at Herbert, and never really has been. Same goes actually for the 92 car as well. There's been a good spread of the semi-pro and AM lineup within that, and they've had 5 drivers to try and get through as well, so slightly different scenario there.
Yeah, I think you see, certainly you see, and I think Black Falcon especially are very keen to only run their fastest drivers, to the extent that if a Code 60 turns out, they'll actually put the gentleman in just to run the Code 60 for 20 minutes and try and burn more of his time off. I mean, I realise, you know, there's different ways of going racing, there's different ways of financing racing, and it's you know, and the guys know when they sign up what's going to happen. But you know, sometimes you do get this complete freedom of driver choice.
And Nicholas Bett over the line now in the second place TCE car. That gap's established itself to something around 2 minutes now between the Golf and the second placed Audi. So Yannick Mettler not under any immediate pressure for the lead of the touring car category. What about further down the order? Thierry Chocondali for Code Racing Development, looking like that he will get the team a result, and they'll still be running come the checkered flag, which is something that shouldn't be overlooked. Their podium that they've been hunting down looks like it's just going to evade them though, and that car will finish in 4th position. But Code Racing Development have hopefully got a flavour of the way Creventic racing is organised, and fingers crossed they'll be back for more later on in the season. There's no French race, no home race technically on the bill, but a couple of chances to go to Italy, Barcelona and Zandvoort still on the European calendar for the 24H series in 2020. Just 7 minutes away now from the checkered flag, and Tim Muller dominant out front, but he hasn't done it all on his own, of course, and will no doubt owe an awful lot of thanks to the rest of that squad. Jürgen Hering starting the car at midday yesterday. Marco Seefried, who's not done as much driving possibly as I'd expected, but he will have done his minimum, I would imagine, without having all of the data in front of me, but he's done at least a couple of stints, so there's no danger there that the team will cop a fine because of that. Michael Hughes did take a long time to get involved. They'd been through their rotation at least once, possibly twice, before Michael Hughes then got some time for the overnight stints. And Taki Constantinou, less driving really towards the back nine section. He did a number of stints in the early phases. Again, when really the car was establishing itself in that second place initially, and then that eventually became the race leader because of the dramas for the 91.
So looking slightly, so first, what I would say, let's give credit where credit is at the bottom of the pile, which is the Veloso Motorsports Paolo Pinarello, because their car, whilst down as a Porsche Cayman GT4 CS, actually isn't a full fat GT4, so they're kind of going in almost in a Cayman Club Sport race rather than a GT4 Club Sport. And after some problems early on, they've had a good run in the second half of the race. They managed to pull themselves up, gone past 500 laps, put in a couple of particularly quick starts. 157, they've had some good laps, and that Cayman has looked good, and they've really made the most of the chance to do this endurance race at their I don't know, home track, I don't know where in Portugal they're from, but local track. And from what they were kind of left behind in qualifying, they've really managed to look pretty good.
Just 4 minutes and 15 seconds still to go, and down the hill goes the TCE series leader, the Volkswagen Golf of Altarama Motorsports. The two cars very tricky to tell apart from the two door mirrors, and the bright amber door mirrors on the number 112 then, as it works its way through Sagres corner and down the hill towards Valp. That will tick off another lap, and those TCRs are doing just over 2 minute laps, so on to its penultimate circuit for Yannick Mettler. Where on the track is the Herbert Motorsport Porsche? Somewhere in the middle sector, I think.
Sweep up the hill to Portimao,
yes.
And he goes round 11, and see him here. He's just the one that's shining in the rear quarter light, as it used to be called, and the green checkerboard compared to the red checkerboard of the 91 cars. 92 car now turning up through 13, or raised up the hill forward, dropping down slightly to the entrance to the first part of Sagres, which is a long double apex corner, which you obviously want as much exit speed as possible as you go past those Sagres seat labelled grandstand. Push it outside, and you push now down the hill towards 15, which is Galp. Take the apex, and you just work the car out wide onto the main straight, which of course straight but not flat, Johnny, as you climb up, and then you pass start finish line, you just gently drop down before of course you do hit a big dip before you get into turn one. And you can look both sides at the various detritus on the side. The rubber has built up over 23 hours and 57 minutes. And he sweeps now past the unused motorcycle chicane and into the quite tricky 4-5 section. He brakes early for 4, switches back, doesn't tickle the track limits. And in fact, you just saw for the first time there in that shot that unpleasant sausage curb is still there on the inside of 4, John, but no one will decide to hit it this time.
No, thankfully the sausage curbs are in the direction of travel, generally speaking, around Portimao circuit. I think there have been some sausage curbs in the past on certain corners that have been removed on the request of the teams, but yes, placed deliberately so that you're not going to cut across the inside of the corners. That doesn't prevent you from running wide on the outside, of course, and that's where a lot of the track limits infringements have come, I think, when cars have run wide on the exit of, for example, turn 9, certainly coming out of turn 4 and 5, and then out of the last corner of the circuit as well at 15 at Valp. But for the penultimate time, Tim Muller then reaches the top of turns 10 and 11 at Portimao, now down through 12 and 13. And Yannick Mettler might have to actually do an extra lap here, because remember that the race distance is all dictated by the leader of the GT series. Despite it being 2 races in one, we're never going to have the scenario where the TCE series race finishes before the GTs, because the race distance is always dictated by kind of overall, we always say overall in inverted commas, race leader. And that is Tim Muller, who is going to have 50 odd seconds still on the clock as he comes out of the final corner and across the line. Confusingly for me then, on the starters gantry there was someone I think dressed up as a checkered flag, and I thought, is that actually ready to be flown now? But still 45 seconds left on the clock. That's going to be one more lap of the Algarve International Circuit. And the 92 car has barely put a wheel wrong over the last 23 hours and 58 minutes. Now charging his way down the back straight, when at the very last minute Tourer VIP will come into sight. Make sure you get your braking point accurate and probably nice and early in this phase of the race. Leaning on a 47-minute advantage now over Daniel Alleman's 91 Herbert Motorsport Porsche, and an even bigger gap back to third position, which is the 991 class leading Mullner Motorsport entry. TCE, by the looks of things, going to go the way of Autorama Motorsport after they were dominant last year and of course took the team victory with their other car, hence the reason why that's run with the number 1 race number. But it's going to be the 112 of Yannick Mettler that will come home as the best placed TCE series car. So Antti Burri, Kari-Pekka Laaksonen, Miklas Born, Roberto Ferri and Yannick Mettler, who's currently doing the driving. But also huge congratulations to Jürgen Hering, Taki Konstantinou, Marco Seefried, Michael Hughes and Tim Muller, who is at the wheel of the 92 Porsche now, coming through Sagres corner. They are doing a stage finish, yes. 92 probably waiting for the 91 car to catch up, despite there being 3/4 of an hour between them per the timing and scoring system. They're going to try and get the ideal shot now as these 2 Porsches cross the line, maybe even side by side. Very akin to the 24 hours of Le Mans, which should have been happening this weekend, of course. I know the virtual Le Mans still taking place for the next few hours. There's the checkered flag, though, here at Portimao for the 24 hours, powered by Hankook, and our first international full metal race since the Dubai 24 hours. The 124 will take the checkered flag as well, but not victory in the TCE series, because that honour will go to this car heading through turn 12 now and up to 13, the number 112 of Autorama Motorsports. Actually, it's a little bit earlier on in the lap, just heading through the Portimao double right-hander now. So within the next 30 seconds, we will have a TCE series race winner as well. But great, finally, Nick, for the 92 to take honours over the 91. Often the bridesmaid, the 92 crew, but they're not going to let those next door in the next door garage forget this too quickly.
No, a fantastic performance. I mean, that was a Herberth-style performance from the other Herberth car, the 92 machine. Absolutely metronomic. Did everything they needed to do to get to the end. You know, obviously, the turning point was the 91 needed to have a gearbox change. It cost them just over an hour and 5 minutes. But, you know, that's what endurance racing is about. It's about maximising opportunity. And the opportunity came, you know, still with, 14 hours to go. They grabbed it with both hands and just drove an incredibly solid 14 hours of driving and still finished, 48 minutes ahead of the other car, which means, they would have been comfortably second without that. Because it's no ifs and buts. They were the reliable car, they were the quick car, and they are the car that is going to be taking the virtual trophies with the virtual champagne.
Really well done to Yannick Mettler and his teammates, Kari-Pekka Laaksonen, Antti Burri, Miklas Born and Roberto Ferri, who take victory in the TCE series. the winning margin in the end in TCE, timed at 2 minutes and 21.9 seconds. Autorama Motorsport victorious over Come To You Team Audi Sports Audi RS3, and that was the car of Nicolas Burt, Nathaniel Berton and Tom Coronel. And the AC Motorsport Audi from the Belgian outfit taking third position in car number 188. So well done to Stéphane Perrin, Michael Blanchimont and Christophe Heyman, together with Hannes Morin. So the cars that are still out on track will now head to the pit lane. And this is a delicate operation now as well, to make sure the cars stop in the right positions, but also that the drivers keep their distance from one another. Many of the cars will just continue straight on and towards the garages. But the first, second and third place boards are neatly assembled in the pit lane and lining up right alongside the orange number 1. Orange, of course, for GT Series, is the number 92 car. And with the Herring sponsorship, the Precoat sponsored Herbert Motorsport Porsche drawing alongside in second position.
So this is quite nice to see the way they're going to do a socially distanced trophy presentation. They're awarding the trophy to the car, and that's how it should be, because it's the car that's done all the work, really, isn't
well,
it?
yeah.
The drivers just chat around being travelled down. It's the car, yes. Well done the cars. And I think there's a cap for each individual drivers, bumping elbows in the way of the world. I think you're pretty much safe with one man masked and another man wearing a helmet. But as Peter and Ole hand out the trophies and the caps, another elbow bump from Daniel Alleman to Peter, and then we'll also see, I think, a TCE podium, or not a podium, TCE, what do you call it, Parc Fermé Grid Trophy Award situation just to the left-hand side of this picture as well. So good idea. Get everyone to see the trophies, get everyone to see what they've won, and award it to the car, which is where it should be.
Yes, we probably should see that a few more times as well. As you say, it's the car that done the whole of the race length. Great result as well for Carlos Vieira, Jeroen Blekemolen, Tom Cloet and Moritz Krantz, who sneak onto that's the cruel word. They quite rightly are on the overall podium for the GT Series. They established themselves as one of the top 3 runners, well, by about half distance actually, and then just kept on ticking off the laps, and Müllner Motorsport get a very good result indeed. Only 2 cars entered in the 991 class, so I'm sure both cars within that division spotted the possibility of an overall top 3. Sadly, the Speed Lover Porsche faded mid-race, but Carlos Vieira and the rest of his crew have done a very good job in coming home with an overall top 3 and a win in the 991 division. So, a smallish crowd now assembling itself close to that Parc Fermé area. It's going to take a little bit longer to get the final car of the 3 from the TCE series into position, but 1 Golf and 2 Audi RS3s make up the podium in the TCE series. There's the 921, a trophy for taking the victory in the 991 Cup class. But the much sought-after third place trophy will be the one that they really enjoy taking back to Belgium. And Müllner Motorsport entering a couple of cars, one as a Cayman and in the new Cayman class. That car also did get to the checkered flag. Torsten Young bringing it home, along with Daniel Boer, Daniel Schwerveld and Axel Sartingen. So that draws to a close our coverage of the 24 hours of Portimao. Just time, though, to confirm the results to you. Obviously, given you the top 3 in each of the various series, but let's remind you about 92 and 91 finishing first and second, 731 laps at the full race distance. So smashing the previous record, which was 7:22, set in 2017. And Tim Muller, along with his teammates, come home then in car number 92, ahead of the 91 of Daniel Alleman, Ralph Bone Alfred and Robert Renauer, and in third position and winning its 991 Cup class, the Müllner Motorsport Porsche, car number 921. Then the top three finishes in the TCE series from Autorama Motorsport, Come To You Team Audi Sport and AC Motorsport. Torsten Young from Müllner Motorsport, joined by his teammates Daniel Schwerveld, Axel Sartingen and Daniel Bohr, finished in 7th position then, and were also class winners in the Cayman class. 8th place, we go back to the TCE series to see a Volkswagen Golf from Code Racing Development coming home to see the checkered flag there after 616 laps. Sadly, it was a non-finish for the 9th place car, the number 978 Speed Lover Porsche from the 991 class. Autorama Motorsports' sister car didn't get to the finish. Their number 1 car needing a gearbox change that they actually carried out, but then it would appear that electrical gremlins were their downfall. Actually did an out lap, which became an in lap, but the car stuck in gear for that exploratory lap, and Stefan Tanner looking very frustrated indeed. They couldn't actually get the car back into the race, sadly. Paolo Pinheiro, our final finisher in car 408 for Veloso Motorsport, and the last 4 cars, although they started the race, they weren't able to finish because of a variety of different issues, including an engine failure for the Red Camel Cupra and fully locked rear wheels for the Pro Sport Racing Aston Martin Vantage. So there we are, a race distance smashing Portimao 24 hours, powered by Hankook, and delighted that you could keep John Hindhaugh, Nick Damon and myself, Johnny Palmer, company for it throughout. Do we hear any more from Nick and John, or is that...
I'm sorry. I was just mesmerised by your fabulous summary.
Tongue slightly in cheek there, Nick, but thank you for the compliment nevertheless.
Absolutely not, Johnny. You're looking for me. No, I was sitting there going, this is I'm getting to find out what's going on. It's finished. So we have so we are reconvening in hopefully in about a month for the 12 Hours of Monza.
Yes.
The 10th, 11th of July. Looking forward to that.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your efforts, either here in London and also back in Milton Keynes today. You've had plenty of work to do, and also for your efforts on Friday, which are not overlooked by myself, Nick, and John. I know involved very much in that qualifying session yesterday as well. Busy day for John Hindhaugh yesterday with virtual and full metal racing incorporated into one day, and thank you for his company as well throughout the course of the final 3 hours. As Nick says, we'll be back with Creventic Racing in just under a month's time, the 10th and 11th of July, for the 12 Hours of Monza. Very much looking forward to finally getting that one into the books. Join us for that. Bye for now.